Chapter 60. Oh, that person is the descendant of an old friend of mine. Speaking of this person, he is really a good man. He is loyal, but he is also brave and resourceful. His martial arts are excellent. Although he is young, he is a rare good man. Du Shiqing sighed and shook his head. He introduced Chu Yang's background and emphasized the ambush he encountered. Finally, he said, if it were not for him, I am afraid that I would not have met him today. Plus, this person's talent is unimaginable. He can infer many things from one example, and he has a photographic memory. His intelligence is enough to be called a hero of the age. Du Shiqing's tone was full of praise for Chu Yang. It was to the point where he spared no effort in praising Chu Yang. Moreover, his tone was sincere. It was obvious that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. If Chu Yang had followed him all the way, there would not have been such an unexpected result. Du Shiqing also had some regrets. Along the way, Du Shiqing mentioned more than once that he wanted to take Chu Yang as his disciple and teach him medicine. In fact, before he arrived here, Du Shiqing said with disappointment, Chu Yang, this old man has a feeling that this trip to Iron Cloud will be the end of me, Du Shiqing. If you cannot accept it, I am afraid that my medical skills will be lost forever. Even though he said this much, Chu Yang still refused. Du Shiqing let out a long sigh. Even though there was no hope for him to take Chu Yang as his disciple, he still passed on his life's work, that immortal medicine, and the tattered 100 Herb Sutra. This 100 Herb Sutra is the origin of my medical skills. In my entire life, I have only seen through it. And this immortal medical art is my life's work. If you can learn it, that would be the best. If not, then help me pass it down. This was Du Shiqing's request to Chu Yang. And these two books were Chu Yang's biggest unexpected gain on this trip. In Du Shiqing's mind, even though Chu Yang had not agreed to be his disciple, he had already inherited his skills. Naturally, he did not hold back in praising Chu Yang. On the side, Manager Gao snorted. He faintly felt that if Chu Yang wanted to leave, he should not have entered Iron Cloud Citadel. However, he felt sorry for misunderstanding Chu Yang. So, he didn't say anything. In any case, that guy didn't seem to care about fame and fortune at all. Mr. Du is really a benevolent saint. His benevolence has spread to the world. After hearing about this matter, my respect for Mr. Du has increased by another notch. Tai Butian smiled. His eyes flashed as he remembered the name Chu Yang. Right now, Iron Cloud Nation was thirsty for talents. If not for Sir Butian taking over Iron Cloud Nation's military and establishing Butian Pavilion to supplement Iron Cloud Nation's strength, Diwu Qingro would have already led his army north. To Tai Butian, she really couldn't let go of any talent right now. What's more, such a terrifying talent like this one. Tai Butianshin's expression turned cold. She whispered to a black-clothed man beside her, order Wu Kuangyun to come to Iron Cloud Citadel. Tell him that if he can't explain the attack on Divine Dr. Du, his body doesn't need to come. Just send his head. Wu Kuangyun was the commander of Iron Cloud Nation's Iron Blood Cavalry. He was also a fierce general on the border between Iron Cloud Nation and Great Xiao. He was ranked 10th on the continent's list of famous generals. Although he was only at the bottom of the list, it was not something that could be achieved through bravery alone. Tai Butian mentioned Wu Kuangyun at this moment. Obviously, from the timing and style of this matter, she concluded that this matter was definitely done by Wu Kuangyun. The man in blue nodded. He couldn't help but smile. He thought to himself, old Wu, this time you are out of luck. Although what you did was something I wanted to do. Turning around, Tai Butian's smile was already amiable. She said softly, Senior Du must have been frightened. Du Shiqing repeatedly said that he didn't dare. He didn't know why, but looking at the amiable face of this Senior Butian, Du Shiqing felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if the unethical thing he did many years ago was under the watchful eye of the other party. Perhaps this Iron Cloud Citadel was really going to be his burial ground? Du Shiqing stared blankly at the tall city walls not far away. His eyes revealed a trace of confusion. Then he sat back in the carriage. His expression was calm as he headed towards Iron Cloud Citadel. Whether it was a blessing or a curse, It was already here. Since he had already done something, there would always be a reward. Everyone had their own thoughts. They unconsciously quickened their pace towards Iron Cloud Citadel. After entering Iron Cloud Citadel, Du Shiqing's carriage went straight to the royal palace. Tai Budian could not wait any longer. Her father's condition was getting worse and worse. She wanted Du Shiqing to immediately cure her father. Even if she had other considerations, she had to put them aside for now. She also knew that being able to invite Du Shiqing this time was most likely due to Di Wuqing's calculations. Di Wuqing allowing Du Shiqing to come was definitely not with good intentions. It was most likely to let Du Shiqing use his miraculous skills to cure her father's illness so that he could compete with her for power. However, even if Tai Budian knew that this was a trap, she could only gladly jump into it. Because that was her father. Not only the emperor, but also her father. That night, when Tai Budian returned to Butian Pavilion, it was already very late. Two people had been waiting in the main hall for a long time. Did you find that person? Tai Budian asked softly. He gently rubbed his forehead with his thin and weak left hand as he asked in a tired manner. This subordinate is incompetent and could not find this person's whereabouts. One of them bowed and said, "This person entered Iron Cloud Citadel and suddenly disappeared. We could not find him anywhere. Send more people to look for him." Tai Budian rubbed her forehead and sighed. She rubbed her forehead with her hand and added, "Do not disturb the people. In the current Iron Cloud, even the power of the people is extremely important. Don't say anything like that." The person replied and then said worriedly, "Your Highness, this subordinate sees that you are really tired these days. Should we find someone to help you relieve your fatigue?" "That is also good. Let Lan Xiang come and relieve my fatigue." Tai Budian did not decline, but her expression showed that she was even more tired. The two men in black retreated. Tai Budian frowned and fell into deep thought. Her brows showed that she was very worried. She remembered what Du Shiqing said after seeing her father's illness. "Your Highness, the Emperor's illness has been accumulating for many years. Moreover, there is still poison left in his body. After a long time, it has seeped into his bone marrow and is difficult to cure. I can only do my best and leave the rest to fate." Tai Budian heaved a heavy sigh. Seeped into his bone marrow and is difficult to cure. These words made Tai Butian's heart feel as if it was being torn apart. "Imperial Father, is there really no hope?" The palace maid called Lan Xiang had already come in. Seeing that Tai Budian was deep in thought, she did not dare to disturb her and stood quietly to the side. After a long time, she heard Tai Budian sigh deeply. The corner of her eyes actually flashed with sparkling light. Grandfather cried? Grandfather Butian, who had always been strong and supported the entire Iron Cloud nation, actually cried? Lan Xiang's heart suddenly ached. Only people like her who were close to Grandfather Butian knew how hard it was for Grandfather Butian. In order to catch up to Di Wuqing, Grandfather Butian had sacrificed so much. From when he was a child until now, in these 10 years, Grandfather Butian had not slept more than 4 hours a day. The entire nation, the lives of millions of people, all depended on him. Di Wuqing and Great Zhao Empire, with their powerful national strength and superior intelligence, were like a mountain pressing down on them. If it was anyone else, they would have collapsed long ago. But Tai Budian, with the body of a young man, was able to withstand it. Chapter 61. Tai Butian sighed again and said faintly, "Lan Xiang, help me rub my temples." It was as if he already knew she was coming. But Lan Xiang knew that he was in a trance and did not notice her. Because Tai Butian would never show his weakness in front of anyone. Tai Butian raised his eyes to look at Lan Xiang. His eyes were clear and bright. He did not even need time to recover. He had already regained the demeanor of the Grand Elder Butian. Lan Xiang agreed and walked over quietly. "Grand Elder is tired, too tired. What I need to do is to use all my strength to let him relax for a while." But after a while, Tai Butian suddenly thought of something and sat up. Frowning, he pondered for a while and said, Send someone to see if beyond the heavens sects Bao Kuang-lei and Miss Wu Qian are asleep. If they are not, ask them to come to my place. Because he suddenly remembered that when Du Shiqing introduced Chu Yang, he seemed to have said, abandoned disciple of Beyond the Heavens sect. Abandoned disciple, these two words made Tai Butian very puzzled. Such a person, no matter which sect he was in, would be a top character. They would protect him like a treasure, and would not even have enough time to cultivate him. How could he be expelled? Beyond the Heavens sect's sect master Wu Yunliang, he had met him a few times. He did not seem like such a foolish person. Could it be that there was something hidden? Or was there some conspiracy? Or was there something else? Lan Xiang was startled and obediently replied, yes. Only then did Tai Butian lie down again. Even when he was lying down, the snow-white cloak on his body was still tightly wrapped around his body, not revealing the slightest bit of his figure. After a while, Bao Kuang-lei and Wu Qian arrived. After a while, looking at the backs of Bao Kuang-lei and Wu Qian, Tai Butian lay down thoughtfully. The Chu Yang mentioned by Bao Kuang-lei and Wu Qian, and the Chu Yang mentioned by Du Shiqing were not the same person. As for the matter of abandoning a disciple, the two of them did not know the inside story. They only knew from the sect's announcement that Chu Yang had killed his own martial brother, which seriously violated the rules of Beyond the Heavens sect. The fact that he was not executed on the spot was already extremely lenient. Tai Butian's brows furrowed slightly. After a long while, he mumbled, "This Chu Yang is really interesting." His voice was very low, so low that other than himself, no one else could hear it. MP. Once Chu Yang entered the city gate, he wiped his face and changed his appearance. He walked along the road for a while, turned into an alley, and then turned two corners. When he came out again, he had changed his appearance. He was in his 30s, had a fierce face, and was slightly hunchbacked. Step by step, he walked out vividly like a camel. It wasn't that he didn't want Tai Butian's men to find him. Rather, he wanted to accumulate the greatest amount of capital for himself before letting them find him. After all, it was impossible to have a certain status without strength and capital. Therefore, Chu Yang decided to go all the way. In broad daylight, he started to accumulate capital. But his methods were a bit unscrupulous. The reason why Di Wuqing Rou coveted Ironcloud Nation was because Ironcloud Nation had countless mines. Moreover, most of them were refined iron. Therefore, Ironcloud Nation was so extravagant that even the ordinary soldiers' arrows were made of half-refined iron. One must know that even with the wealth of Great Zhao, only the arrowheads of the soldiers' arrows were made of pure iron. The rest of the arrows were made of bamboo. Furthermore, Ironcloud Nation is close to the grasslands, located in the north. The people there are tough, and their military strength is strong. If Great Zhao does not eliminate Ironcloud Nation first, then no matter which direction they go, they will always feel like there is a thorn in their back. Chu Yang came out of the alley and came face to face with a fat man. He had a fat face and big ears. His eyes were somewhat lustful as he looked around. The clothes he wore were not too luxurious, and when he walked, his back was slightly bent. He did not seem to be a powerful person. Moreover, besides looking at young ladies and young wives, he avoided looking at other people. It seemed that he was a timid person. Chu Yang took a step forward. Like a demon, he directly grabbed the man's collar. In the next moment, he was back in the alley and dragged the fat man in like a dead pig. Chu Yang's movements were very fast. Outside, one could only see a shadow flash, and the fat man who was hated by everyone on the street disappeared without a trace. The fat man was caught off guard. He was so scared that all the fat on his body was trembling. He begged for mercy but did not dare to speak loudly. Big master, I have parents and children, what this and that? Chu Yang glared fiercely. Let me tell you, your parents are Matoa from 5 Flower Mountain outside the city. Today, I entered the city to do some business. I found you pleasing to the eye, so I gave you some pointers on how to get rich. 5 Flower Mountain, Matoa? The fat man trembled as he looked at Chu Yang's camouflaged hunchback. He was so scared that he almost fainted. Suddenly, out of nowhere, he said, Big Master King, there is no 5 Flower Mountain outside the city, Fuck. Chu Yang slapped him. You don't care if there is 5-flower mountain or not. Let me ask you, do you want to live or die? I want to live, I want to live. Big Master, please spare my life. The fat man answered very quickly. Tell me about the situation in Iron Cloud Citadel. Chu Yang said fiercely, be more detailed. If there is even a little bit missing, I will use all the fat on your body to light a lantern. As he said this, he clasped his hands together, and the sound of his joints cracking could be heard. Combined with his ferocious gaze, it was enough to scare people out of their wits. The situation in Iron Cloud Citadel naturally needed to be clear. The fat man's body went limp, and he fell to the ground like a pile of mud. His face was full of tears and mucus. His pants were dripping wet, and his front and back exploded at the same time. A foul smell wafted out. Half an hour later, Chu Yang covered his nose and quickly walked out of the alley. After walking for a long time, he finally took a deep breath of air. Oh my God, I almost suffocated to death. It was really too smelly. Later, the fat man did not know if it was because he was so frightened that his stomach was not feeling well or something else. He kept farting while trembling as he explained. This made Chu Yang extremely depressed. However, it had to be said that even though this fat man did not have much makeup, he was still quite familiar with Iron Cloud Citadel. From the south to the north, from the east to the west, he gave Chu Yang a very detailed introduction. He even went so far as to which streets and alleys, which families' young ladies were particularly beautiful, which families' young ladies were particularly beautiful, which families' young ladies were particularly coquettish. Everything was described in detail. A certain girl had fair skin, a certain girl had a curvy figure, and a certain girl had a pair of amorous eyes that were easy to seduce. Which family had more money, which family had more power. This was the division between the black and white sides of Iron Cloud Citadel, their respective businesses, the distribution of the mines outside Iron Cloud Citadel, which family could not be offended, which family had to be avoided, and so on and so forth, and so on. Chu Yang's head was spinning from listening. In the end, he followed the fat man's instructions and went out to buy a map. Chapter 62. Who says there are no bandits in the city? Motherfucker, this is bullshit. Why would bandits differentiate between the city and the countryside? Look at that Matoa, his eyes are obviously green, specifically asking about which family has more money. Fatty wanted to cry but had no tears. That hateful guy, not only did he scare me half to death, he even took my poor banknotes before leaving, not even leaving behind a few taels of silver. He even glorified it by saying, doing good for the heavens and doing good deeds. Before leaving, he even said, I spent your money to solve your problems, please don't take it to heart. My heart is kind. Motherfucker, if everyone was as kind as you, then there would be no one left in this world. Brother, I've given you so many ways. You can find whoever you want to do justice for the heavens. Even if you find those pretty girls, I won't show any mercy to them. Just don't come looking for me. I'm really not rich, Fatty prayed as he walked. That afternoon, Chu Yang left the city and went to the mines outside the city. He wanted to buy some steel, but when he arrived, he found out that Wu Yunliang gave him 300,000 taels of silver. It sounded like a lot, but he wanted steel? Sorry, our Iron Cloud nation does not have steel. Chu Yang painfully spent 10,000 taels of silver to buy a large pile of steel at a high price from the workshop. More than half of the 300,000 taels of silver were gone. After only one night, Chu Yang looked at the piece of iron in front of him that was only as thick as his arm and wanted to cry. Without any other choice, he threw in the rest of his money. In the blink of an eye, he went from a rich man with 300,000 strings of silver to a pauper, but it was still a drop in the bucket. Chu Yang frowned, anger rose in his heart, and hatred grew in his heart. Money, the most important thing is money. One coin can drive a hero to death? To Master Chu, this was a joke. One coin can drive an idiot to death, this is true, but if you want to drive Master Chu to death? Haha. Chu Yang's eyes emitted a wolf-like green light. The next night, several wealthy families in Iron Cloud Citadel were suddenly robbed. The thieves were very clever. In the dark night, they came and went. They really were nocturnal. When they woke up in the morning, a few rich men looked at their empty coffers and fainted one by one. Even if millions of rats entered the granary at the same time, it wouldn't be so clean. If a mouse entered the granary, it would at least leave a pile of debris on the ground. However, the vaults of these rich men were completely empty. When one stepped into the vaults, there would be echoes. A cloud of dust rose from the ground, all the gold was gone, all the silver was gone, and all the treasures were gone. It was so clean that even a mouse would come out with tears in its eyes. Wasn't this thief too ruthless and clean? All the bodyguards didn't hear anything, but there was nothing left. One of them, Li Laokai, had hidden the banknotes under his pillow. When he saw the warehouse, he felt somewhat comforted despite the pain in his heart. He thought that he would be able to keep some money for himself. Who would have thought that when he went back to check the banknotes, he would be knocked unconscious on the spot? When he woke up, hundreds of thousands of taels of banknotes had disappeared without a trace. He could only vaguely make out a hunchback. In each of these rich men's warehouses, there was a line of writing left behind, showing the honesty of this great thief. On it was written, "I will not change my name, I will not change my surname, I will rob the rich to give to the poor." There was a heroic aura of one man taking responsibility for what he had done. The next morning, outside of Ironcloud Citadel's government office, the grievance redressing drum was beaten loudly. Moreover, it was continuous. Dozens of fat old men had tears on their faces. They were on the verge of collapse as they crazily beat the drum. Later, the entire square in front of the government office was filled with cries. The cries were mournful, like the cries of apes deep in the mountains, causing people to cry. However, in Ironcloud Citadel, from the top to the bottom, everyone looked on with cold eyes. There were even some who gloated and set off firecrackers. The officials did their routine registration and let these old men go back to wait for the news. The main reason was that these people were not good people. Normally, their eyes grew on top of their heads, they were arrogant, and they bullied men and women. Even when Bu Tian was collecting money to build an army at the beginning of the year, these cheapskates did not even give a single cent. They said that they had no more food at home and were about to starve. They were about to starve, yet they lost hundreds of thousands of taels of silver and tens of thousands of taels of gold? You guys are too talented. You only lost this much money? You deserve it. Damn it, why didn't you steal all your money along with it? You actually expected us old men to recover your losses? Even if we recovered, we would have said that we did not recover it. It would have been better if we just used it as military expenses for the army. However, the news about the arrest of 5 Flower Mountain Horse Camel was immediately spread out like wildfire. No matter what, this evil and greedy thief had to be arrested and brought to justice. In one night he robbed 50 rich families. How many accomplices did he have? If he was left alone, it would cause endless trouble. Thus, all the law enforcers in Ironcloud Citadel became busy. In just a few days, they did not catch Horse Camel, but they caught thieves and pickpockets one after another. Outside the yamen, in a corner far away, a fat man dressed in luxurious clothes trembled as he looked at the wailing moneybags. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets, his lips trembled, and his face turned pale. It was as if he had sat on a hard bench for half a day. There was not a trace of blood on his face. Heavens! This was really done by Horse Camel. Can swear. Because these people he stole were all the people I told him about. Not a single one was left out. Oh my God. This thief is really fierce. Luckily, this old man was caught early. If it was someone else who was caught, I would be one of the unlucky ones right now. To tell the truth, the reason why Chu Yang was so accurate was all because of these cheapskates. This fat man's contribution could not go unnoticed. Because this guy was a bit shameless and despicable, of course, his friends were all jackals of the same tribe. At that time, under Chu Yang's threat, in order to save their lives, who cared about friends? Of course, there were also some people who were doing honest business and were passionate about public welfare. These people were very rich. However, this fatty did not get along with these people. They did not like him and were not familiar with him. In a moment of panic, the people he blurted out were naturally the people he was most familiar with. Hearing the crying, the fatty sneakily covered his ears. He turned around, twisted his fat butt, and rolled all the way home. Motherfucker, these old people are basically the top rich people in the world. Ha, who told them to look down on me for being poor? Now, Humph, which one of you can compare to this old rich man? Thank you, horse camel. 3 days later, Chu Yang, with a head that looked like a chicken's nest, opened his shop on a busy street 2 streets away from the imperial palace. This was a 3-story building. Just yesterday, it was still a tea house. Today, it suddenly changed owners. 3 teams in charge of moving and building were busy for an entire day and night. Although the original owner of the tea house was puzzled, he did not ask anything for the sake of the glistening gold. He directly moved away. What a joke! The total value of his tea house, including the staff and equipment, was only 50 taels of gold. The other party was rich enough to throw out 200 taels of gold. Moreover, he did not want anything inside. He could just find another place and reopen with the same staff. He would be a fool not to accept. Therefore, this place was named Chu. It was now under the jurisdiction of the rich and powerful Big Boss Chu. Chapter 63. On the signboard facing the main street, the words, Heavenly Armament Pavilion, were written in golden lacquer. Half of the street was illuminated in a golden color. It was dazzling. The couplets on the left and right were also made of silver and painted in gold. The entire facade was filled with the appearance of a nouveau riche. As soon as people came here, they would immediately smell the stench of copper in the air. First couplet, cutting iron like mud is not a dream, let me open your eyes. Second couplet, divine weapons are always here, if you want to come quickly. Horizontal scrawl, no patience to wait. Next to the door was a sign, Heavenly Armament Pavilion, open for money, do not enter if you do not have enough money. 10,000 taels of silver was the starting price. 1,000,000 taels of gold was not considered rich. Take out treasures, and you will be satisfied as soon as you enter. Not only was it a nouveau riche, but it also did not look like much. From the signboard to the couplet, it was all very tacky. Even those few words were crooked and full of evil. It was like a mouse's tail was dipped in ink, and then a bowl of wine was poured into the mouse's mouth. After the mouse was drunk, it dragged its tail and drew it. Then Big Boss Chu sat upright and waited for the fat sheep to come. This was called Jiang Taigong fishing, the willing bite. Of course, Chu Yang didn't know about this story, but there was a handsome and talented girl named Feng Ling who knew about it. It had to be said that after several days and nights, Chu Yang was tired, but he was also very excited. The taste of reaping without sowing was too wonderful. Damn, no wonder so many people wanted to be thieves. With a stretch of his hand, he had gold and silver. It was too satisfying. Robbing the rich to help the poor, yes, it made sense. At that time, they were so rich and so poor that they wanted to die. Robbing a little was not considered helping the poor, right? When this Heavenly Armament Pavilion opened, it made everyone's eyes bulge. Too arrogant, too outrageous. In all the previous dynasties, no one had ever seen anyone do business like this. This was not doing business, it was simply offending people. Moreover, it first insulted itself and then offended others. In an instant, this Heavenly Armament Pavilion became the biggest joke since the founding of Iron Cloud Nation. It quickly became famous. Quick, go and take a look. There's a crazy guy who's opening a shop on the street. Whoosh! A large group of people quickly gathered outside the Heavenly Weapon Pavilion to watch the excitement. It was a cloudy day. Since everyone had nothing to do, it was not a bad idea to take a look at this idiot. However, everyone was a little puzzled. Why couldn't this fool show off? Why did he have to come to Iron Cloud Citadel's busiest street to embarrass himself? Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? But if he was really an idiot, where did he get so much money to open a shop here? Big Boss Chu crossed his legs. There was no divine weapon on the counter in front of him, only a cup of tea. Hot steam and the aroma of tea rose from the teacup, and Big Boss Chu's head was also touched by the aroma of the tea. He was really sleepy. On the left wall near the inner door hung a sword, a saber, a short sword, and a short saber. It seemed like these 4 items were what gave him the confidence to open his business. They were also the divine weapons that he was prepared to sell. Outside the door, everyone was guessing, sighing, and laughing. Chu Yang turned a deaf ear. The people he wanted to sell to were not these people. Plus, Chu Yang's memories from his previous life clearly told him that Iron Cloud Nation did not care about anything else, but the two words, heavenly weapon, would definitely touch the sensitive nerves of Iron Cloud Nation's upper echelons. Get out of the way, get out of the way. A good dog does not block the way. I'm talking about you, what are you going to do? Unreasonable shouts came from afar. A few big black men with open collars were walking over like crabs from the east, west, north, and south. Wherever they went, people would avoid them as if they had seen a god of plague. What heavenly weapon pavilion? What the fuck? A big man with a big mole on his face and a thick tuft of long black hair looked at the plaque of Heavenly Weapon Pavilion. His nose pointed to the sky and suddenly became angry. Motherfucker, are you crazy? Don't come in if you don't have enough money? Old money, but I want to go in, what about it? Big brother. The underling next to him who was looking left and right shouted in surprise, this is all silver. Pure silver. This guy pointed at the plaque and jumped up and down. He looked like the wind. Silver. The big man pinched the plaque in confusion. Suddenly, his voice changed. Fuck. It's really silver. Looking up at the plaque, his gaze suddenly changed. It became greedy and vicious. Who is the boss inside? Come up, come up. The big man's voice was almost hoarse. He swallowed his saliva up and down the street. Fuck, I don't want anything. I just want to scare them and move the plaque back. That's enough. You want to buy something? Chu Yang crossed his arms and slowly walked out. There was no other way. In the entire Heavenly Weapon Pavilion, he was the only one. The boss and the workers were all taken care of by him. When he came out, Big Boss Chu's nose became crooked. He was always ready to catch a big fish. In the end, before the big fish came, he attracted a group of hooligans? This was too unlucky. This shop is yours? The big man's nose pointed to the sky. What? Chu Yang was in a bad mood. His tone was naturally not good. What? Fuck, you have a temper? It seems that you don't know who is standing in front of you. The big black man stretched out his hand and was about to grab the collar of this hateful little guy and beat him up. Fuck off. Chu Yang shouted in a low voice. He opened his eyes wide and shook his arms. Then, a burst of visible black smoke emitted from his body with a bang sound. It dispersed into an overwhelming and surging evil aura. It carried an ice-cold chill as it rushed over with a bang. This big man was only a street hooligan. He was not even a martial disciple. He only relied on his two arms to play the role of a hooligan. How could he resist the soul intimidation of a revered martial artist? As soon as the big man finished speaking, he suddenly felt a chill. Then, he was hit in the face by the evil energy. His entire body and soul were frightened. His eyes rolled back. He felt as if he had fallen into an endless nightmare. Countless evil spirits were coming from all directions. They were bleeding from all 7 orifices. Letting out a scream that did not sound like a human's, the big man staggered back. Suddenly, he held his head with both hands and rolled back and forth on the ground. He screamed like a madman, "Spare me! No, I didn't kill him. Spare me, spare me." He suddenly jumped up and turned around to escape. However, he fell down as soon as he took a step. Blood flowed out. He was paralyzed on the ground. He could not stand up. However, he was still desperately crawling forward. As he crawled forward, his pants gradually became wet. Only the heart-wrenching voice of begging for mercy echoed in the air for a long time. The 2 little brothers following him did not know what had happened. However, when they saw their boss turn from normal to terrifying in the blink of an eye, they felt a chill run down their spine. They could not help but shout. One to the left, the other to the right. They scattered like birds and beasts. Chu Yang looked at the 3 people running away with a perplexed expression. He scratched his head as if he did not know what had happened. After thinking for a while, he said, "Oh yes. The heavenly weapons all have a murderous aura. It seems that these people have bad intentions. They offended the heavenly weapons. The heavenly weapons have a spirit and are punishing them. Hearing him say this, the onlookers immediately understood what was going on. They could not help but feel fear on their faces. They took a step back and felt a chill run down their spines. Chu Yang laughed and said, "Everyone, who else wants to come in and take a look? Please, please, don't be polite." With a boom, the onlookers dispersed. Chu Yang smiled mischievously and turned around to go back. Heavenly Armament Pavilion is really amazing. The heavenly weapons there actually have a spirit. If someone has bad intentions, they will directly send down heavenly punishment. This rumor spread faster than the previous one. After all, many people had seen it with their own eyes. When this spread out, it would be even more sensational. The person who said this spoke in a low voice. He was very careful. The people who heard this felt a chill run down their spines. Who dared not to believe it? Didn't you see that tuft of hair in the East Street was scared out of his wits? What? Tuft of hair did not know. It was that ruffian who collected protection money. Chapter 64. That night, Chu Yang was still somewhat puzzled. On the first day of business, Heavenly Armament Pavilion's arrogance had already attracted a lot of onlookers. Many of them were martial artists. There were also a lot of people with gorgeous clothes and arrogant expressions. They were probably people from big clans in the capital. Why were these people able to resist their curiosity and not come in to take a look? It must be known that having a divine weapon in hand could increase one's battle prowess by at least one level. No matter if it was in Jianghu or on the battlefield, it was a treasure that could save one's life. Having a divine weapon that far exceeded the quality of an ordinary divine weapon was equivalent to having an extra life. Was this not enough of an attraction? No matter if it was a martial artist or a martial artist, this attraction should be enough, right? Chu Yang was puzzled. What was going on? As far as I know, once people in Iron Cloud Nation heard about this, they should have flocked over regardless of their chastity. But why was it so strange that no one was interested? Did I remember wrongly? On the second day, there were still onlookers. But it was even more deserted than the first day. There was not even a single person coming in. On the first day, there was at least a local ruffian causing trouble. On the third day, there were even fewer onlookers. Chu Yang could not help but feel depressed. Buying or not buying was one thing, but at least a few people would come in to take a look. There were millions of people in the capital, but they were not curious? What was going on? On the third night, there was finally some movement. Chu Yang was looking at the book that Du Shiqing gave him, Immortal Medicine. Opening the title page, there was a preface. In this world, who cannot die? There is none. Therefore, doctors can only cure immortal diseases. But what is an immortal disease? Yukai believes that all injuries and illnesses caused by external forces or by people outside of the body are considered to be undying illnesses. An immortal disease is the mandate of heaven. Chu Yang's spirit was lifted as he read. The meaning of these words was very clear. As long as the person was not too old to the point of dying, any disease could be cured. Of course, this was only in theory. But even if it was only in theory, the tone was extremely arrogant. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Chu Yang was reading with great interest. Hearing this, he impatiently asked, "Who is it?" "I heard that there are divine weapons for sale here, so I'm here to pay you a visit." A tired voice came from outside. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Although this voice sounded tired, there was a kind of arrogance in it. It was as if it didn't put anyone in its eyes. Only someone who had been in a high position for a long time would have such a tone. Moreover, this voice was very young. He closed the book and opened the door, only to see a young man in brocade clothes standing in front of him. His face was calm and tired, but between his brows, there seemed to be a light worry that could not be resolved. Looking at Chu Yang opening the door, he didn't have any strange expression. Although he was dressed extravagantly, the hem of his clothes was covered in dust, as if he had not rested after a long journey. How could such a person with such an arrogant tone end up in such a sorry state? The moment Chu Yang opened the door, the young man's stomach suddenly growled. It seemed that he was extremely hungry, but there was no trace of embarrassment on his face. When the lamp was lit, it was as small as a bean. "Please have a seat." Chu Yang could tell from the aura and demeanor of this person that this young man in front of him was certainly not an ordinary person. He was definitely the younger brother of a big family. This was because the aura of someone in a high position was not something that an ordinary official's family would have. Although it was easy for rich families to produce hedonistic sons, it was also the easiest place to produce talents. This was because they were much higher than ordinary heroes. Chu Yang was a little suspicious. How could such a treasure of a big family come out in the middle of the night without any guards? Moreover, why was he in such a sorry state? The young man smiled and looked around the store. Then he walked in and sat down across from Chu Yang. He smiled and said, "Brother, what is your name? Do you want to buy a weapon, or are you here to visit a friend?" Chu Yang smiled and asked. "Good." The young man looked at him for a while before lightly praising him. As he spoke, he took the sword from his waist and placed it on the table. He looked at it with pity for a while before slowly pushing it in front of Chu Yang. "Brother, since you specialize in divine weapons, why don't you take a look at my sword?" Chu Yang was speechless. He was here to sell weapons. He had not opened for 3 days and did not have a single customer. Now that someone had come in the middle of the night, it seemed like he was also here to sell weapons. Was he in the same industry? His luck was really unlucky to the extreme. But thinking about it, he still reached out and took the sword. Since he had nothing to do, he had nothing to do. When the sword entered his hand, it was heavy. Chu Yang could not help but relax his brows and praise, "Good sword." "Brother, you have not opened it yet. How do you know it is a good sword?" The young man in brocade looked at him with a smile. Although his clothes were in a sorry state, his words and actions were calm. This showed that his upbringing was not bad. Normal long swords are 3 feet long. 3 feet 3 with the scabbard. Your sword is 3 feet 5 with the scabbard. Chu Yang looked at the sword and said, "Swords are the kings of weapons." The phrase, "an inch longer is an inch stronger," refers to swords and not other weapons. Everyone thinks that this phrase is applicable to any weapon, but it is a misunderstanding. Because swords are soft-killing weapons. If it is long, it is not strong. If it is not strong, it is brittle. If it is brittle, it is easy to break. Thus, short swords are easy to make, but long swords are difficult. Like your sword with such a long piece, it increases the difficulty of making a sword. But from the scabbard and the hilt, it is simple and old, with a faint blood energy. It is enough to show that it has been through many years and has experienced many killings. But it is still the same, it is undoubtedly a good sword. Well said. The young man laughed, his laughter full of praise. He said, "Brother, you really are someone who understands swords." Also, the weight of an ordinary sword is around 5 kilograms. The ideal weight of a sword is around 7 kilograms. Chu Yang lightly said, "It's hard to say if it's mixed with other specific metals. Your sword, including the scabbard, is already more than 15 kilograms. Chu Yang said, "The sword is heavy, but the shape is unchanged. It is definitely a good sword." The praise in the young man's eyes became even stronger. Chu Yang flipped his wrist. With a clang, like the roar of a dragon or a tiger, the long sword came out of the scabbard. Instantly, a cold light shone out. Like a pea light shining on the sword, it flashed with thousands of lights, illuminating the entire room. "Good sword," Chu Yang exclaimed as he carefully examined it. The more he looked, the more he praised. The sword was like autumn water. Even if it was still, it seemed to be constantly trembling. Looking at a beauty under the lamp is a great joy in life. But only people who love swords know that looking at a famous sword under the lamp is the greatest blessing. The young man sighed and said, "Swords have a spirit, a heart. Looking at a sword is looking at killing, looking at Jianghu. Looking at a famous sword in autumn water, the roar of a dragon or a tiger, there are iron horses and ice rivers in Jianghu." That's right. Chu Yang sighed and said, "Looking at a sword is looking at Jianghu." He raised his head and looked at the young man in front of him. He said, "But you and I have never met before. You did not come here to let me look at this sword and feel Jianghu." As he said this, the sword light flashed. Chu Yang did not even look at it. The long sword had already returned to the scabbard with a clang, as if the sword had its own eyes. You are indeed an expert in using swords. The young man smiled. But I naturally did not come here just to let you look at the sword. I just want to find a person who loves swords. His eyes flashed with a look of pain. He said, ever since I came out, I did not have a single cent on me. I have traveled 8,000 miles to come here. But all the things that I had before have been sold. Only this sword is left. He looked at Chu Yang with a burning gaze. Brother, I only need 100 taels of gold. I will pawn this sword with you. After a period of time, I will come back to take it. At that time, I will return you 10,000 taels of gold. Take this sword. Chu Yang was silent. He was a little suspicious. Chapter 65. In this world there are countless professional pawnshops. I'm just one of them. This shop is only for my own purpose. It's to attract attention and increase my status. As long as my purpose is achieved, I'll close it down. Since opening, I haven't done any business. But someone is rushing to pawn my shop in the middle of the night? Moreover, it's such a good sword. There was something strange about this matter. It's too unusual. Is there something fishy about this? Late at night, in the imperial residence, the tall and sturdy Wu Kuangyun left in a sorry state. He came to Tai Bu Tian's place. Before he could even say a word, Tai Bu Tian stopped him. No need to explain. I know it's you. Then he was left hanging here. He was left hanging for the entire afternoon and night. This great general who had made outstanding achievements in Ironcloud Nation, who was mighty and powerful in front of the two armies, and who was invincible in the hearts of his subordinates, was constantly wiping his cold sweat for the entire afternoon and night. Tai Budian had been giving out official replies and making arrangements non-stop. Batches of people came in and batches of people left. Everyone was in a hurry. Only Wu Kuangyun stood motionless in the hall like a wooden stake. He had lost a lot of face this time. Wu Kuangyun looked at the curious, surprised, and mocking gazes in everyone's eyes. He was so ashamed that he almost wanted to find a hole to hide in. Especially the few guys he knew and was very familiar with. They looked at him as if he was a monkey. Wu Kuangyun looked at Tai Bu Tian countless times with begging eyes. Little ancestor, even if you cut off my head, don't let me poke it here. However, Tai Bu Tian didn't even look at him. She didn't even look at him. She didn't even talk to him. Since Tai Bu Tian didn't speak, he naturally didn't dare to speak. The power of this young crown prince was secondary. The key was the reputation he had accumulated over the years. Wu Kuangyun was extremely respectful of him. It was because of this respect that he was afraid. If it were someone else, this notoriously bad-tempered general would have already slammed the table and cursed. However, in front of Tai Bu Tian, he had to think twice even if he wanted to breathe loudly. Tai Bu Tian's last words saved him from his predicament. He looked at the official on the table in front of him and said without raising his head, "Go find the military law office and receive 100 canes. Everyone involved in this matter will be punished in the same way." Tai Budian looked at Duke on the table in front of her. Without even raising her head, she said, "I believe that you won't play any tricks." Scram. Tai Budian didn't get angry. Her voice was very calm. However, this calm voice made Wu Kuangyun's heart tremble. Because this meant that Tai Budian was really angry. If it was not for the crisis of Ironcloud Nation, perhaps his head would already be hanging from the flagpole. Sigh. If it weren't for the crisis, I wouldn't have done such a thing. Wu Kuangyun felt as if he had been pardoned when he heard Tai Bu Tian's punishment. He expressed his thanks again and again. Then, he turned around and left the imperial residence like a rabbit being chased by a hound. Then, he let out a long sigh of relief and sat down on the ground with a plop. Then, he opened his mouth and sighed, "My dear mother has finally come out. This feeling is worse than being beaten up. As for playing any tricks..." Wu Kuangyun didn't even think about it. Although 100 canes were a lot, he could still bear it. However, if he played any tricks, it wouldn't be a matter of 100 canes the next time. There were many examples of this kind of thing. Wu Kuang-yun absolutely wouldn't dare to go against the Imperial Residence's orders. Imperial Residence, we have found that person. Oh? Where is he? Tai Badian was looking at the mountainous pile of memorials on the table. Her right hand was holding a brush made from weasel hair. Shwa shwa shwa, she replied to several memorials without thinking. Although his speed was fast, he was able to see every single one of them clearly. Moreover, he had also gone through careful consideration in his heart. Every reply hit the nail on the head and went straight to the heart of the matter. This kind of insight was admirable. This morning, there was a rumor in the streets of Iron Cloud Imperial City that someone was scared to death. When we heard the news, we went to take a look. Unexpectedly, the person you are looking for is the shopkeeper of a shop. That person's expression was somewhat strange. It seemed that he couldn't help but laugh. Shopkeeper? Tai Badian finally couldn't help but tremble. Her brush smeared a smudge on the memorial in front of her. This was really unexpected. How could such a wolf-like person be a shopkeeper of a shop in Iron Cloud Citadel? However, Heavenly Armament Pavilion. The black-clothed Imperial Guard described Heavenly Armament Pavilion and said, "It seems to be selling divine weapons." However, the arrogance in his tone is unprecedented. Divine weapons? Very arrogant? Tai Badian gently put down the brush in her hand. Her beautiful eyebrows slightly wrinkled. After a long time, she thoughtfully said, "Tomorrow I will go take a look." Also, rumor has it that the crazy person offended a divine weapon and was punished by the heavens. However, according to my investigation, that person was frightened by Chu Yang's aura. His soul left his body, causing him to go crazy. Oh! Tai Butian's eyes flashed. She asked, what kind of cultivation level would be needed to scare someone to the point of going crazy? This is hard to say. The green-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, "Generally, if it is a martial artist below revered level, even ordinary people would not be scared to the point of going crazy. This is because aura is after all an intangible thing. Moreover, the aura of a martial artist can only be keenly grasped by a martial artist of the same level. However, there are always accidents." What accidents? If the person emitting the aura is the kind of person who has killed countless people and has a blood debt, or a general who has killed countless people all year round, once he releases his aura, that kind of murderous aura would probably scare people to death on the spot without any accidents. However, this Chu Yang is so young. This seems a bit ridiculous. The green-clothed man furrowed his brows in distress. He also felt that his words were too inconceivable for that teenager. At such a young age, how could he have killed so many people? Oh! Tai Badian let out a long "oh." We wanted to go in and take a look, but we were stopped by people from the military. They secretly sealed off Heavenly Armament Pavilion and did not allow anyone to enter. People from the military? Tai Badian suddenly smiled. Are they from Imperial Uncle Long Cheng? Looks like Imperial Uncle is going to make a move. Tai Badian smiled in a relaxed manner. I didn't expect that a mere Heavenly Armament Pavilion would make Royal Uncle Long Cheng, who has been living in seclusion these past few years and whom even I rarely see, appear. This Chu Yang is really my lucky star. Also, we suddenly lost contact with 3 of the 7 branches of Butian Pavilion in Great Zhao. I am afraid Diwu Qingro has made a move. Tai Badian furrowed his brows and thought for a long time before slowly saying, "It cannot be Diwu Qingro. Diwu Qingro is not that impatient." He did not say why it was not Diwu Qingro. It seemed to be a conclusion that could not be refuted. Is there any other news? The southeast of Great Zhao has begun to mobilize troops. 3 big legions are moving closer to Ghost Cry Valley. However, this seems to be directed at Limitless Nation and has nothing to do with Iron Cloud. Iron Cloud was located in the north of Great Zhao. The southeast of Great Zhao was thousands of miles away. However, when the green-clothed man said this, Tai Butian's face suddenly became serious. He muttered, "Southeast?" His eyes suddenly shone with a sharp light. He muttered again, "Southeast? 3 big legions?" Chapter 66. Yes, southeast. The man in blue was a little surprised by this response. How could the mobilization of troops thousands of miles away affect Iron Cloud? Tomorrow afternoon, have all the generals and military officials come here. Tai Bu Tian frowned and said seriously, Great Zhao's mobilization this time is definitely unusual. Order Bu Tian Intelligence Pavilion to quickly gather information. Once there is news, immediately send Iron Blood Express. Send the news to Prince Tai Long Cheng. Tai Bu Tian added, since he came out, he should know. Even if he doesn't come out, he still needs to let me know that he knows. This sentence was like a tongue twister. As she said this, Tai Bu Tian also smiled. The man in blue's eyes flashed. Tai Long Cheng was Tai Bu Tian's uncle, the first prince of Iron Cloud. But he was not only a prince who lived like a prince, he was also a general. A famous general. On the list of famous generals of the continent, he was number one. He was invincible and undefeatable. The entire border of Iron Cloud was managed by him like an iron plate. For Iron Cloud to be able to hold on for so long, besides Tai Bu Tian's resourcefulness, there was also Tai Long Cheng's power. The two of them, one internal and one external, one martial, were the best weapons to intimidate Diwu Qingro. After the arrangements were made, Tai Bu Tian waved her hand gently and said, You can leave first. You have worked hard. I will take my leave. The man in blue quietly left. Southeast. Diwu Qingro, are you going to start? Tai Bu Tian took a deep breath. Only then did she pull back her thoughts. Right now, there were still things to take care of. Especially Heavenly Armament Pavilion. Heavenly Armament Pavilion? Tai Bu Tian uttered these three words word by word. Her heart was burning with passion. With that person's ability, if he said these words, it must be true. What Tai Bu Tian lacked now was a divine weapon. This kind of weapon might not be very useful to ordinary soldiers, but Bu Tian Pavilion, which Tai Bu Tian established herself, urgently needed this kind of divine weapon. Because there was a considerable number of suicide soldiers. There was also a number of assassins secretly trained by the Iron Cloud royal family for many years. When carrying out an assassination, if one had a divine weapon in hand, the chances of success would increase by several times. Even if it was only a 10% increase, it was still worth it for Tai Bu Tian to buy it at a high price. However, there had never been such a channel. Iron Cloud Nation has many mines, but high-level weapons have always been Iron Cloud Nation's weakness. Besides, this kind of divine weapon only existed in legends, and no one had ever seen it before. Now, someone had actually opened the Heavenly Armament Pavilion here? Tai Bu Tian decided that regardless of whether this news was true or false, she would go and take a look tomorrow. An assassin was a death warrior. For a long time, people had thought of assassins and killers as the same thing. But this was a big mistake. Assassins and killers all had the goal of killing their enemies. However, the process was different. Once an assassin made a move, there would only be one outcome: death. Either the assassin would die or the target would die, or both sides would perish together. He had to pay with his own life before he could talk about killing the target. Regardless of whether the target died or not, the assassin was doomed. Therefore, there were often assassins who entered the enemy's heavily guarded areas to assassinate. Regardless of whether they succeeded or not, once they made a move, they would die first. Therefore, assassins were usually called death warriors. But assassins were different. Assassins were particular about fleeing far away after failing a strike, then slowly looking for an opportunity to strike. They were particular about protecting themselves first, then killing the enemy. There was a fundamental difference between these two. Therefore, even if there was a ranking in the world, there would only be the number one assassin, and not the number one assassin. Because assassins could not be ranked. If a person decided to be an assassin, then he would be a living dead person. This is limited to personal understanding and this book's setting. Do not criticize. You might find it very strange. That young man's fingers gently stroked the blade of the sword. His eyes were full of passion and reluctance. He slowly said, Black Dragon is a good sword. Anyone who owns it should take good care of it. I had visited a few pawnshops, but those people were all greedy. Pawning my sword to them will only be an insult to my black dragon. Forgive me for being blunt, Chu Yang said casually. Since you can own such a sword, your skills should not be weak. Whether it's robbing or sneaking through walls, the so-called gold and silver to you is just a piece of cake. Why do you have to pawn your beloved sword? What are you talking about? The young man looked as if he had been greatly insulted. He stood up and said angrily, "How can I, Gu Duxing, do such things?" Gu Duxing. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes widened. So it's him. The memories of his previous life suddenly appeared in Chu Yang's mind. Gu Duxing, the successor of the Gu clan. He is one of the most outstanding talents of the younger generation. Rumor has it that he was nicknamed Sword Fanatic since he was young. He is obsessed with swords since he was born. He became a sword disciple at the age of 3, a swordsman at the age of 7, and a sword master at the age of 13 or 14. At the age of 18, he became a sword great master. At the age of 21, he became a sword revered. At the age of 33, he was already a grade sword king. He became the youngest person to become a sword emperor since ancient times. This kind of promotion speed was simply an unimaginable legend. Gu Duxing, he had practically created a myth and legend of the three heavens. Such an achievement, in the entire three heavens, only the evil Duke Ao Xie could compare to him. Gu Duxing Ao Xie, they were the idols of all the youths in the three heavens. Even in his previous life, Gu Duxing was also a person that Chu Yang, the poisonous sword-revered martial artist, looked up to. Chu Yang was determined to reach the peak, and a large part of it was because of these few geniuses. But Chu Yang would never have thought that the soaring dragon sword king from his previous life had fallen to such a state. He actually wanted to pawn his famous treasured sword here. How did he say this? No wonder when he heard the name of this black dragon sword, it sounded so familiar. So it was him, it was actually him. That year, there were 12 influential people in the three heavens. Black Devil, Dark Bamboo, Lone Guest, Poison Spirit, Heavenly Secrets, Li Xiong Tu, Black Saber Qian Hao, Evil Duke, Meng Luo, Qiong Hua, and Tian Bu. 12 people ran rampant in the three heavens, turning the entire three heavens into a giant rag. Every one of them was a rare expert, a top talent. Their lone guest was this young Master Gu Duxing in front of him. Chu Yang glanced at this legend of a generation who would run rampant in the three heavens in the future. His heart was lively as he calculated. Looking at him, he was only around 20 years old. In other words, he had not become a sword-revered martial artist yet. But he was definitely a sword great master. And a high-level sword great master. This was a meat pie that fell from the heavens. Damn, a high-level fighter sent to me by the heavens. It's rare that he's still so poor. Of course, what's even rarer is that I'm still so rich now. I've never been so rich, but Chu Yang was also somewhat puzzled. A dignified sword great master. For what reason did he fall to such a state? A sword great master? Pawning his own sword? What the fuck is this? But from this, it could be seen that this Gu Duxing really looked the same as the legends from his previous life. Upright, firm, straightforward and upright. Gu Duxing, in his entire life, acted arbitrarily and ran rampant in the world. But there was one great advantage to this. All the expenses he needed were earned legitimately. There was absolutely no wealth of unknown origin. Chapter 67. A master swordsman could be forced to this point by worldly gold and silver and still not steal or rob. Although Chu Yang despised him a little and disagreed with this approach, he had to admire this guy's persistence. Gu Duxing, right? Chu Yang smiled and put on an unfathomable look. He pointed at the 4 weapons hanging on the wall. Take a look first. How do my weapons compare to yours? As he spoke, Chu Yang stood up. He took down a sword and a machete from the wall. He placed them in front of Gu Duxing. Gu Duxing was stunned and a disdainful look appeared on his face. He squinted and said, Your weapons look new from the outside and have not been used. They are obviously freshly made. The scabbard is shiny. Although there are some cloud patterns lingering on it, it looks like ordinary steel. It's not worth much. This guy is really direct. This kind of weapon is just a common item. It's okay to kill chickens. At best, it's only good to deceive people who don't know the trade. As Gu Du-shing spoke, he reached out to take the scabbard sword. He was indeed a master swordsman. He didn't even look at the saber. As soon as the sword was in his hand, Gu Du-shing suddenly let out a sound of surprise. The disdainful look on his face disappeared in an instant. It was replaced by a strong sense of suspicion. This sword is a little strange, Gu Du-shing muttered, but his heart was shocked. This sword was actually heavier than his own. Chu Yang chuckled. He then stood up and walked into the inner room. Looks like this guy is hungry. I'd better prepare some food for him. Chu Yang was 100% assured that his weapons would be with Gu Du-shing. This guy almost starved to death but still didn't steal. He would rather pawn his beloved sword. If he didn't believe him, then there was really no one else to believe. Even if Di Wuqing stole his sword and escaped, Chu Yang wouldn't be surprised. But if Gu Du-shing stole his sword and escaped, wouldn't that be too funny? After a long while, Chu Yang brought the food out. He saw that Gu Du-shing was still sitting at the table with his eyes wide open. He maintained a look of extreme shock. This guy was obviously very hungry, but unexpectedly he was indifferent to the food that Chu Yang brought out. He only looked at the sword in his hand and muttered to himself, "How is this possible? How is this possible? How can a sword that has not been nourished by human blood be so sharp? What's impossible?" Chu Yang held an iron bar as thick as an arm in his hand. Grabbing the sword in Gu Duxing's hand, he sliced the iron bar as if he was peeling an apple. With a slight sound, a thin piece of the iron bar was shaved off. Gu Duxing's eyes were wide open. He could see that Chu Yang was definitely not channeling his martial energy. It was just the sharpness of the sword itself. Whoosh. Another wave. Whoosh whoosh, half of the arm-thick iron bar had been shaved off. On the ground, there was a piece of shaving-like patch, black and shiny. Gu Du-shing felt like he was about to collapse. Due to the conflict between him and his family, as well as other reasons, he snuck out. But at that time, he was in a hurry and forgot to bring money. Along the way, he had pawned most of his belongings. Besides, he was a man, not a woman. Why would he wear any accessories? It was just a jade pendant and a few golden beads that were used as hidden weapons. But after entering the pawnshop again and again, Gu Duxing was thoroughly annoyed by those people. When his jade pendant and golden beads entered, they actually became tattered jade pendant, tattered golden beads. Is there even a broken version of this thing? So even though Gu Duxing had been hungry for 2 days this time, he was determined not to go to the pawnshop. What kind of honorable sword was his black dragon? If those birdmen called it a tattered sword again, he was afraid that he would not be able to resist drawing his sword and killing people. So he came all the way here. After hearing the legend of this heavenly armament pavilion that scared people crazy, he tried to find this place. When he saw the 3 words, Heavenly Armament Pavilion, he suddenly felt very comfortable. Heavenly Armament Pavilion? Wasn't his black dragon a heavenly armament? Other than the 2 words, Heavenly Armament, there was really no other word that could match his black dragon. Even the description of a heavenly armament was not enough. The black dragon had spirituality. So Gu Duxing came in. He had already made up his mind. As long as the other party accepted, he must gather money in the shortest time possible and redeem the black dragon with the fastest speed possible. Of course, there was a prerequisite. That was that the owner of Heavenly Armament Pavilion had to treasure the black dragon so that he could be at ease. How could he have known that the place he casually walked in had such a treasured sword? The legendary sword that could cut iron like mud. Did he really see it? Secretly pinching his own thigh, Gu Duxing was finally sure that he was not dreaming. The next moment, Gu Duxing suddenly became furious. He was mad with anger. You sold such a sword to these vulgar people? Gu Duxing fiercely jumped up. His eyes were like copper bells as he stared fiercely at Chu Yang. The rumbling in his stomach became louder and louder. His mouth was also roaring, stamping with rage. Ha! Chu Yang blinked his eyes. This is blasphemy. Crime. An insult to these heavenly swords. Gu Duxing roared. He directly went crazy. Seeing that the other party still had such an indifferent expression, he could not help but be so angry that his heart was about to explode. Such a heavenly sword, if it was not a peerless swordsman, it would not be able to own it. It was not worthy to own it. Wasn't it said that a treasured sword was matched with a famous person, and a pearl was given to a beauty? How could ordinary people own such heavenly weapons? Heavenly weapons were well-deserved. I won't allow it. Gu Duxing jumped up. His eyes were fierce. Absolutely not. Chu Yang was stunned. Looking at this brother whose stomach was rumbling so loudly that he was about to starve to death, jumping up and down in his shop with such an agitated look, he actually did not allow him to sell his own things. What the heck, this was too ridiculous, wasn't it? Brother, this shop seems to be mine. Chu Yang did not know whether to laugh or cry. Gu Duxing was stunned. Then, he said decisively and domineeringly, "What do you mean mine? Not even yours." Chu Yang was speechless. This guy, no wonder his cultivation progress was so fast. It seemed that he was already obsessed with swords. He was directly in a severe state of chi deviation. His infatuation wasn't just a little bit. This is a rare treasure sword in the world. Gu Duxing's eyes and face were even exuding a kind of fanatical glow. This is such a perfect treasure sword. This is a killing weapon. If such a sword pierced into a person's heart, if it chopped off a person's head, how cool would that be? Just thinking about it is enjoyable. As he spoke, he closed his eyes and stretched out his hand as if he was holding a sword. His mouth made a simulated sound, completely forgetting himself. Cha-cha. This is a sword. This is the home of a sword. Chu Yang was dumbfounded. Looking at this crazy guy, he directly categorized this guy as a lunatic. There was such a thing? Gu Duxing was so agitated that he was convulsing. With a clang, he pulled out the saber on the table. The saber flashed. This guy's convulsions were even more severe, directly close to severe convulsions. This saber is also a rare treasure sword. He jumped to the side of the wall. With a swoosh, the short sword and saber were unsheathed at the same time. This is practically the duo of all martial artists in the world. Gu Duxing was already stunned. Suddenly, he stared at Chu Yang with grief and indignation. You actually want to sell such a sword? You actually want to sell the duo of all martial artists in the world? With his eyes wide open, he approached Chu Yang step by step. The muscles on his face spasmed. His eyes suddenly bulged like a frog's and suddenly shrank back into a ray of light. His lips trembled. Suddenly, he roared with an earth-shattering roar, "Are you still human?" Chapter 68. Chu Yang almost fainted. Beautiful study room, I only wanted to use these swords as bait, that's all. Why did I sell the duo of all the martial artists in the world? It's just selling a sword, is there a need to be so serious? I actually became the enemy of all the martial artists in the world after selling this sword? If that's really the case, then I really can't live on. Chu Yang was speechless for a long time before he finally found a reason. Gu Duxing, why did you pawn the sword? I wanted to eat. Gu Duxing's brain couldn't wrap itself around it. He didn't know why the other party brought this up. Yes, you wanted to eat. So you pawned the sword that you love more than your life. Chu Yang nodded and pointed at his own nose. But what about me? Have you ever thought that I also need to eat? If I don't eat, I'll still starve to death. I'm the same as you, understand? If I don't sell the sword and I don't have any other skills, what will I eat? Do you eat people? Chu Yang asked aggressively. The more he spoke, the more he felt that he was in the right. He actually questioned loudly. His saliva almost sprayed onto Gu Duxing's face. What this bastard said was pure nonsense. The plaque outside his door was made of pure gold and silver. Why would he need to worry about food and drink? But Gu Duxing obviously didn't notice or didn't think of it. Looking at Chu Yang's agitated appearance, he couldn't help but be tongue-tied. Only then did he remember that this guy in front of him also needed to eat. Although you didn't show any martial skills, I can't see through your cultivation. Gu Duxing finally found a reason. With your skills, why don't you steal or rob? You can at least fill your stomach, right? That's still better than selling such a divine sword. Fuck your mother. Chu Yang was filled with righteous indignation. He shouted righteously, "How can I, Chu Yang, be such a person? Your words are simply insulting my persistence, blaspheming my spirit, tainting my will, and raping my character. I thought you looked dignified, but I didn't expect you to be a thief." But the last word was practically spat out. Beautiful study room Gu Duxing's face was full of saliva. Gu Duxing had asked Chu Yang the same question that Chu Yang had asked Gu Duxing just now. But he had been scolded by Gu Duxing at that time. Now that Gu Duxing had asked about it, Chu Yang was even more untouched. In fact, he was even more aggressive in returning the favor. He couldn't help but feel refreshed. Who the fuck dared to scold the soaring dragon sword king? He dared to do so when he was old. Gu Duxing recalled his answer just now, and immediately felt somewhat ashamed. That's right, don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. If I don't do it, why would this righteous young man do it? He sat in this shop that was filled with stolen silver from top to bottom. He couldn't help but feel respect for Chu Yang in his heart. It turned out that Chu Yang was just like him. He was also a man with perseverance and ambition. It turned out that he was not alone after all. Who said I was stupid? Isn't there a fellow traveler in front of me? Although Gu Duxing was mercilessly reprimanded by the opposite party, he suddenly felt that this young man in front of him was cute. There was a feeling of being like-minded and caring for each other. But, even if it was for food, Gu Duxing looked at these two swords and two sabers, and his heart really ached. The muscles on his face twitched. Thinking that such divine weapons would be sold to someone else, he really felt distressed. This wasn't pawning them. Once they were sold, it would be a complete loss. This matter, can we discuss it at length? Gu Duxing said cautiously, "Brother Chu, for such treasured swords as people who love swords, we have to find a good home for them. If money isn't that important, well, what I mean is, we can still barely get by." Chu Yang rolled his eyes and sighed. "What do you think we should do?" Gu Duxing was stunned. "How about this? I'll give these swords to you, and you sell them. Is that okay?" Chu Yang had a flash of inspiration. Suddenly, an idea came to him, and he couldn't help but be excited. "Since you have nothing to do, just be my assistant here. This way, you don't have to pawn the treasured swords, and you can eat and have a place to stay. Most importantly, you can also find a suitable owner for these divine weapons, and not let them be covered in dust and shame. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Brother Gu, what do you think?" Huh. Gu Duxing was a little dizzy. He really couldn't imagine how he would become someone else's assistant with just a few words. But it seemed like this was also a feasible plan. The reason he came out was to escape. Well, since it was to escape, wouldn't it be escaping there as well? Thinking of the reason he ran away from home this time, Gu Duxing couldn't help but sigh deeply. "Sigh, what should I do?" "But you don't agree?" Chu Yang asked nervously. "It's not that I don't agree, but..." Gu Duxing seemed to have something he couldn't say. "Since it's not that you don't agree, then it's settled." Chu Yang interrupted him and directly made a conclusion. "Brother Gu, from now on we are a family. From now on, you have the final say in this shop. Whoever you want to sell to, I'll sell to." "Well, I don't really know much about this business." Chu Yang was telling the truth. He really didn't know much about this business. But this didn't affect him from using this business to make Gu Duxing stay. "As long as you stay, can you run away from me? If something happens in the shop, you won't care? Damn it, if you don't care, I'll give these swords to a beggar. See if your heart hurts? Anyway, it doesn't hurt. With Calamity Sword, I can have as many as I want." Therefore, under Chu Yang's continuous deceit, Gu Duxing foolishly stayed behind and became Chu Yang's assistant. This guy was crazy about swords, but this was the first time he went out in his life. In addition, he sneaked out, so he naturally didn't have any experience in the martial world. In the eyes of Chu Yang, an old fox with 2 generations of experience, he naturally couldn't refuse. It had to be said that being young was good. Easy to deceive, of course. The biggest reason was that Gu Duxing couldn't see through Chu Yang's cultivation. In his heart, anyone whose cultivation he couldn't see through was naturally stronger than him. Being an assistant under such a strong person and achieving his goal of escaping from his clan didn't seem too bad. It wasn't shameful. After wolfing down the white rice that Chu Yang had brought out, Chu Yang had deftly tidied up a room for him and stuffed him inside. After a night, Gu Duxing asked Chu Yang doubtfully, "There's something wrong, what is it?" Chu Yang rubbed his temples. He thought to himself, did this guy's brains suddenly become good? "Brother Chu, you only said that you'll provide food and accommodation, but you didn't say anything about salary." Gu Duxing stared and said, "You can't let me work for free, right? I'm a swordsman after all. I should at least have a few taels of silver a month, right?" It seemed that this guy was still somewhat unwilling. Chu Yang feinted. "Brother Gu, there are 2 cabinets in your room. Have you seen them?" Gu Duxing nodded. "Those cabinets contain all my belongings. They're not locked." Chu Yang looked as if he was confiding in him. "Brother Gu, although we've met for the first time and have never met before, we hit it off right away. I've put my life in your hands." Gu Duxing was stunned. Then he turned and ran in. After a while, a scream came from the room. Chapter 69. It had to be said that the moment he opened the cabinet, even Gu Duxing, who had seen a lot of gold and silver treasures, was shocked. The golden light was dazzling. Gold bricks, gold ingots. They were all gold, and there were also huge banknotes more than a foot thick. For a moment, young Master Gu felt a little dizzy and disoriented. For a moment, he only thought that he had entered the treasury of some rich man. Chu Yang actually arranged for him to stay in the treasury and didn't restrict him. Sob. This feeling of being trusted at the end of the road was really too good, too warm. Chu Yang waved his hand earnestly. "Brother Gu, you and I feel like old friends at first sight. You're treating me like an outsider." He thought to himself, "At my place, there are still a few more cabinets. I've robbed dozens of rich men, how can I only have so little? But I still have great use for them." Gu Duxing nodded repeatedly. Suddenly, a question arose in his mind. "Brother Chu, since you have so much money, why are you still selling that kind of famous sword? Last night, this guy had said that if he didn't sell it, he wouldn't be able to eat. But this cabinet of gold and silver banknotes, how was he going to explain it? This gold was enough for 3 generations of rich men to indulge in wine and women. Not able to eat? How ridiculous was this? Please forgive me, Brother Gu. I lied to you last night." Chu Yang looked as if his trick had succeeded. "Brother Gu, do you really think that I sold this kind of famous sword casually? I just felt that it was a pity to see it covered in dust. So, I tried my best to find a good home for it." Chu Yang sighed. This kind of sharp weapon must be in the hands of the right person. It can slaughter the world and laugh proudly in the Jianghu. It can display its peerless elegance in a place of rain and blood. That is the ultimate home of a famous sword. How difficult is it for a person to find a suitable sword? However, it was even more difficult for a sword to find a suitable owner. It's rare that Brother Gu and I are like-minded. I can also slack off. I see. Gu Duxing smiled. The knot in his heart had been untied. He smiled very contentedly. In his heart, a kind of great minds think alike feeling arose. This kind of famous sword was not something to be bought and sold. Even if Chu Yang had some schemes because of this, it was also because he thought highly of him. It had to be said that this kind of mentality after having a good impression of him was different. Because once this warm feeling appeared, even if what the other party did was wrong, he would find an excuse for the other party, and the excuse he found was one that made him feel comfortable. Of course, it is my wish to find the true owner of the famed sword. But we also need to earn enough money for our meals. Chu Yang smiled and said, "Moreover, if the owner of the famous sword doesn't pay a certain price, even if he gets it, he may not cherish it." Gu Duxing nodded and said sympathetically, "That's right. I remember back then when I obtained the Black Dragon, I practically went through a lot of hardships." The two smiled at each other. Compared to the soaring dragon sword emperor in his previous life, the current Gu Duxing was undoubtedly less wise and farsighted, and more impulsive and childish like a teenager. Chu Yang naturally knew the value of the person in front of him. Gu Duxing's stubbornness, his obsession with swords, his persistence in life, and his stubbornness in doing things had not changed in his previous life. Such a person was definitely worth befriending. Chu Yang did not have Gu Duxing's stubbornness as a sword. In his opinion, that kind of persistence was simply foolish. But this did not stop his heart from admiring Gu Duxing. This kind of difference in character was also the reason why Chu Yang in his previous life became a revered martial artist, but not a revered sword artist. Because although he used a sword, all his skills were not just in the sword. "Brother Gu, how do these few swords of mine compare to your Black Dragon?" Chu Yang asked. "In terms of sharpness, they surpass my Black Dragon. In terms of toughness, they also surpass my Black Dragon." Gu Duxing seriously thought for a while and answered seriously, "But in my heart, my Black Dragon is still one of a kind. These few swords of yours, although they are rare divine weapons in the world, I keep feeling that something is missing. If I had to choose, I would still choose my Black Dragon." His fingers lovingly stroked the sword hilt at his waist, and the emotions in his eyes at this moment were so sincere. He was like a young man who was deeply in love, looking at his lover. Although his lover was not an outstanding beauty, and standing beside a top beauty, there was still a long way to go. But the only one who could tug at his heartstrings would always be this one person. Other beauties could make him admire them, but if he had to choose a partner to spend his life with, there would only be this one person. What was missing? Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. Gu Duxing's feeling was right. These few swords looked incomparably sharp, but they were really missing something. Because the iron essence had already been swallowed by the Calamity Sword. And that was the true essence of a sword. Without the iron essence, these few swords were just iron pieces that were terrifyingly dense, and could not become the legendary divine weapons. Because they could never have spirituality. Treasured swords had spirituality, and the more people they killed and drank blood, the more spirituality they would have. But even if these few swords slaughtered the entire world, they would only be ordinary pieces of iron. This subtle difference could only be seen when one reached the level of Sword King, such a high level of swordsman fought. Before this, no one would be able to detect the difference. But although Gu Duxing was only a sword great master now, with his keen intuition, he could already feel that something was wrong with these few swords. "Brother Gu, I did not set up this heavenly armament pavilion just for this." Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, "I have other motives. But this heavenly armament pavilion also needs to exist. This is very complicated and dangerous. It's also very dangerous. I need your help." Chu Yang smiled. "Actually, I really did not think that there would be someone like you. But since you are here, I will not let you go. I believe in you, and I believe in my foresight." Gu Duxing's eyes flashed with a sincere smile. "Okay." It was just one word, but it was Gu Duxing's promise. He could hear that Chu Yang's words were hiding a lot of things, but they were sincere. From the bottom of his heart. So he agreed immediately. No matter what, it was only because the person in front of him was pleasing to the eye. Secondly, this person helped him at the most difficult time. The two smiled at each other, and their two palms heavily clapped together. No one would have thought that this day's clapping would create a legend in the heavenly layer continent. "I come from a big clan. Gu clan. You may not understand the weight of the Gu clan. To be honest, in the entire lower three heavens, there may not be anyone who knows the terror of the Gu clan." Gu Duxing held his wine cup, and his eyes showed a trace of nostalgia. He said with deep feelings, "I am the foster son of the clan leader. After my biological parents died in an accident, my foster father took me to his side and nurtured me with great care." Chu Yang nodded. "If I don't know about the Gu clan, who will?" If I don't know about such a huge clan, I will simply kill myself. So the rumors were wrong. The future successor of the Gu clan was actually the foster son of the Gu clan, and not the direct descendant. My foster father has a daughter and 2 sons. Gu Duxing said, "My 2 sworn brothers ostracized me all year round. As for me, I've really never thought of fighting or snatching anything from them. So I have always resigned myself to it. I am very clear that I am only the foster son of the clan. The core of the clan's power does not belong to me. Even if I have some achievements in the future, I will protect this clan and not let anyone in the clan get hurt. But I will never become the master of this clan." Gu Duxing smiled. This kind of smile seemed so out of place on his cold, chiseled face. Chapter 70. Foster father's daughter is older than me by a year. It was because of her that I left the Gu clan. Gu Duxing's eyes were bitter but also sweet. Since I was young, Sister Xiao Miao has been my guardian angel. No matter what difficulties or harsh reprimands, Sister Xiao Miao has always stood in front of me. When my 2 foster brothers made things difficult for me, Sister Xiao Miao has always helped me. She taught me things I didn't know. She helped me things I couldn't touch. She even went against the clan elders and her own brother for me. I have always been under her protection. I grew up safe and sound. Since I was young, every time I was on the verge of a breakthrough, she would go to the clan's medicine garden and the clan's treasure house to find elixirs for me to help me break through. There were many elixirs that were treasures of heaven and earth. They were priceless treasures that could only be found by chance. And these priceless treasures, along with Sister Xiao Miao's meticulous help, made me a genius. My path of cultivation was smooth sailing. I almost never met any bottlenecks. Because of the elixirs that far surpassed the bottleneck, no obstacle could be an obstacle. And Sister Xiao Miao stole a lot of elixirs. They were elixirs that even foster father and a few elders were unwilling to use. Because of this, Sister Xiao Miao suffered many punishments because of me. And all of this, I was ignorant. Because every time, Sister Xiao Miao would tell me, "Just eat these things, there are plenty of them at home." And I would just eat them like a fool. Chu Yang listened silently. He finally understood the reason why Gu Duxing was able to create a cultivation legend at such a young age in his previous life. With the enormous manpower and resources of the Gu clan, how could the elixirs they collected be ordinary? Gu Duxing ate so many elixirs, it would be strange if his cultivation speed was not fast. We've all grown up. As for me, because of Sister Xiao Miao's unbridled and unending supply of elixirs, my cultivation speed has far surpassed all of my peers. I continuously broke through one level after another, becoming the focus of all the clans. But they don't know how much effort Sister Xiao Miao put into this genius, and how many grievances she suffered for me. And I have always been proud. Proud of my own talent. Heartless. Gu Duxing's eyes flashed with a sparkling light. Suddenly, he raised his head and drained the cup of wine in one gulp. He grabbed the wine jug and filled it to the brim. Until one day, Sister Xiao Miao helped me break through to Sword Great Master, and brought me the family's most precious treasure, the purple cloud Ganoderma. This has infuriated the entire family. Gu Duxing fiercely punched himself in the head. When I broke through the bottleneck of Sword Great Master, foster father broke one of Sister Xiao Miao's legs in a fit of rage. They locked her up. Because of this, my 2 sworn brothers became even more resentful of me. They came to cause trouble for me, but I, who didn't know what was going on, beat them up. Then the eldest brother said, "Don't you feel ashamed hiding behind a woman? Now that you've caused Miao Ling to be in such a miserable state, don't you feel guilty?" I was shocked and chased after them to ask. This time, they didn't hide anything and told me everything. Gu Duxing's tears dripped into the wine cup. I went to find foster father, but he just sighed. He told me that Sister Xiao Miao had been punished by the elders for stealing the family's property many times, and was locked up in the dragon prison cave. And the time limit was forever. Because the purple cloud Ganoderma is the family's most precious treasure, it was only waiting for the first supreme elder to take it when he broke through to Martial Emperor. If he succeeded, he would lead the family to become the #1 family and then charge into the upper 3 heavens, establishing the family's only hope of hegemony. Sister Xiao Miao stole it and gave it to me, and I had already taken it, ruining the family's decades of preparation. This is unforgivable to the entire family. If someone from another family of equal strength can become a martial emperor first, then the Gu family will be destroyed at any time. And Sister Xiao Miao gave me the purple cloud Ganoderma, which is equivalent to cutting off the family's path forward. This mistake is unforgivable. Chu Yang sighed deeply. At this moment, from Gu Duxing's description of Gu Miaoling, he saw Mo Qingwu. These two women are obviously the same. For the person they love, they will do anything. In their eyes, there is nothing else except for the person they love. I went to see Sister Xiao Miao because foster father allowed it. It was the only chance I had to see her. After I saw her, she was about to be locked up in the dragon prison cave. We looked at each other through the purple gold fence. At that time, I cried so hard that my heart was broken. I asked Sister Xiao Miao, "Why are you so stupid?" "For me, it's not worth it, not worth it." Big drops of tears fell from Gu Duxing's eyes. He simply picked up the wine pot and poured it into his mouth. Tears and wine dripped into his mouth. Chu Yang sighed and silently picked up another pot of wine. Bang! The empty pot of wine was placed on the table. Gu Duxing's eyes were red. At that time, Sister Xiao Miao said, "Stupid, you are really stupid." She said, "When we were young, I treated you like a younger brother and especially loved you. So, I gave you all the good things. But when we grew up, I no longer treated you as a younger brother." When Sister Xiao Miao said this, she looked at me in a daze. Then she smiled sadly and said, "Forget it, you can leave. It's fine, I just happen to be in closed-door training. Silly brother, you are not young anymore, it's time to start a family." It's a pity that Sister Xiao Miao will not be able to drink your wedding wine. Go. Don't come in the future. Just treat it as if you never had a Sister Xiao Miao. Then Sister Xiao Miao turned around and walked into the dragon prison cave. Gu Duxing's face was ferocious. His muscles were contorted and his whole body trembled. Sister Xiao Miao has always been like a deity in my heart. Gu Duxing trembled. I liked her, I worshipped her. But when she walked into the dragon prison cave, I realized that my heart was empty. There was nothing left. I can't live without her. I can't live without her. Gu Duxing roared and raised his head. Tears streamed down his face. But she was imprisoned in the dragon prison cave. With such a big mistake, I'm afraid that she may not be able to come out in this lifetime. What do we have to do? What kind of conditions do we have to meet before we can let her out? Find another purple cloud Ganoderma? Chu Yang's eyes darkened as he asked. It's useless. When the first Supreme Elder heard this news, he was at the crucial moment of breaking through the bottleneck. His mind was shaken and he vomited blood on the spot. His cultivation level slipped and he no longer had the chance to break through to the martial emperor realm. Besides the first Supreme Elder, no one else in our clan could. Then what did your foster father say? Foster father had no choice. Gu Duxing stared blankly at the void in front of him. Tears streamed down his face. I lived like this for 2 years until last month, when foster father arranged a marriage for me. Chu Yang immediately understood. It seemed that this soaring dragon sword king was not only a sword maniac, but also a love maniac. No matter what, even if I'm alone for the rest of my life, I can't let Sister Xiao Miao down. Gu Duxing clenched his teeth. So I escaped. No wonder this guy cultivated like a madman in his previous life and advanced so quickly. It turned out that he wanted to rely on his own strength to break through to the Sword Emperor realm and then rescue Gu Miaoling. Chapter 71. Even though Gu Duxing's talent was heaven-defying, but by the time he became a Sword Emperor, he would be at least 10 years old. As for Gu Miaoling, who was bitterly suffering in the dragon prison cave, she was older than him by a year. The most beautiful days of their lives had finally been wasted away and would never return. If I want Sister Xiaomiao to come out, I have to become a sword emperor. But that is so far away. Sister Xiaomiao is already 21 years old this year. Gu Duxing said in despair, even if I advance quickly, it will take at least 30 to 40 years to reach that stage. 30 to 40 years. How can Sister Xiaomiao endure it? How can she endure it? Chu Yang raised his head, pondered, and said, this matter is not necessarily without a way. You have a way? Gu Duxing stood up abruptly, causing the wine cup on the table to overturn and fall to the ground. A pair of blood-red eyes stared at him. Chu Yang nodded calmly and said, sit down and talk. Brother Gu, the onlookers sees the game clearly. You mainly cultivate with the sword, right? Brother Chu's vision is like a torch. Gu Duxing's eyes flashed with amazement. He only cultivated with the sword and never dabbled in other martial techniques. This way, he could maintain his focus and advance at the fastest speed. However, he had never mentioned this matter to anyone before. Although he had already acknowledged this young man in front of him, he was still so young, how could he have such great vision? Besides, even if it was a martial artist who was at a higher level than him, as long as they did not fight, he would not be able to tell that he was a sword cultivator. How could he tell? You mainly cultivate with the sword. You must know that there is a saying, the sword is unconventional. Chu Yang smiled and said, the sword is unconventional, although it is easy to injure yourself. Once you make a move, it will be a fatal blow. Yes, but this is cultivation. How can I be unconventional? Gu Duxing frowned and thought hard. Brother Gu, how many people have you killed? Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Gu Duxing was surprised, and then he took a breath and said, 7. 7 bastards. Too few. Once a general succeeds, there will be mountains of bones. Not to mention this kind of heaven-defying cultivation. If you want to become a sword emperor, you have to go through countless bloody battles in your lifetime to reach that stage. Chu Yang raised his eyes. Then he said heavily, Gu Duxing, if you are willing to trust me and give me your next 10 years, I am confident that I can make you reach the sword emperor level within 10 years. 10 years. Gu Duxing's eyes widened and shot out a dazzling radiance. Although 10 years wasn't short, compared to 30 to 40 years, it was much shorter. Moreover, he and Gu Miaoling would only be in their 30s 10 years later. So, it still wouldn't be too late. However, was this true? Chu Yang didn't say anything. He just looked at him quietly with a smile. I agree. Gu Duxing said resolutely and decisively, as long as you can get Sister Xiaomiao out in the shortest time possible, not to mention 10 years, even if I have to give you a lifetime, I won't hesitate. Good deal. Chu Yang stretched out his hand. As long as you listen to me, I'll guarantee that you two will be reunited within 10 years. And during these 10 years, I wish us a happy cooperation in advance. Then, what do I have to do now? Gu Duxing asked. If you are worried about exposing your identity, you can first change your appearance. Chu Yang said, then, what you have to do is to look after this heavenly armament pavilion for me. Look after these swords. Have a good sleep and recover your energy. In the next 10 years, blood will flow like a river under your sword. Your enemies will be all over the continent. You must struggle to survive in the crevice between life and death. You must improve yourself in every impossible moment. Only then can you meet my requirements for you. This is a difficult road. It is also a road of no return. But I believe that you have already made your preparations. For the sake of your beloved Gu Miaoling. Hearing the 3 words, Gu Miaoling, Gu Duxing suddenly clenched his fists tightly. His throat let out a low and painful groan like a wounded beast. Only he knew that every time he thought of this name, it was like a knife piercing his heart. No way out? For Sister Xiaomiao, why would I need a way out? Chu Yang stood up and walked to the counter. He took out a piece of paper and dipped his brush in ink. After thinking for a while, he began to write something quickly. Gu Duxing shook his body and stood up. He walked to Chu Yang's side and looked at what he was writing. But as he looked, his eyes suddenly widened to the size of an egg. His 2 eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Revered Berserker Sword Technique. These 4 words were said with great difficulty. Then he suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang in disbelief. Is this real? Revered Berserker sword technique was the fastest way to cultivate the sword. Once it was used, the user's whole body and spirit would be immersed in it. Without reaching a certain level, it would be impossible to stop. This was also the most extreme method. Either you destroy yourself in this extreme madness, or you raise your sword technique to a new level. Cultivating revered Berserker sword technique, one could succeed, the other could be death. There was no third way. This sword technique was said to be created by Sword King Feng Exin hundreds of years ago. Although it was called Feng Exin, it should be called Feng Exin, because everyone was certain that the person who created this sword art was definitely a madman. This sword technique was found in Chu Yang's previous life. In a treasure hunt, someone found Sword King Feng Xian's burial place and took out this sword technique. But after many people studied it, they found that this sword technique could increase one's sword cultivation at the fastest speed, but in the end, it would make the user crazy. Sword King Feng Heart-Sealing Sword King had gone mad and died from practicing this sword art. Countless people tried to change it into a treasure, but no one succeeded. Thus, this revered Berserker sword technique was thrown away. After all, no matter how powerful it would be useless if it went crazy. But the contents of this sword technique were passed down in the 3 days. Until one day, when Chu Yang found this revered Berserker sword technique, he carefully studied it. He found that this revered Berserker sword technique was similar to the 3rd fragment of the Calamity Sword, but it was of a much lower level. As long as he changed some of the important parts of the revered Berserker sword technique, he could cultivate it as usual. And it would still reach the extreme of crazy speed. But the power of this revered Berserker sword technique was not only 1 level lower than the Calamity Sword technique, so although Chu Yang found it, he did not cultivate it. It was just that he had a deep impression of it at that time. But now, it came in handy. The current Gu Du Xing desperately needed this sword technique. And for this guy who was obsessed with the sword to the point of madness, he was the most suitable person for this sword technique. Take it. After Chu Yang finished writing the last stroke, he picked it up and blew on the glistening handwriting before handing it over to Gu Duxing. This was the improved revered Berserker sword technique. What was needed to cultivate this was tenacity and indomitable willpower. Gu Du Xing's hands trembled violently as he took the sword technique. These few thin pieces of paper had given him the hope of rescuing Gu Miao Ling ahead of time. Chapter 72. Just now, when Chu Yang said that he could help him realize the Leduo in advance, Gu Duxing was only half convinced and half doubtful. Moreover, he had the thought of, isn't it the same to run away from marriage and cultivate? But now, he was already convinced without a doubt. This sword technique can guarantee that you will break through to revered sword artist within a year. But you will only be able to break through to revered sword artist before you stop. Otherwise, if you continue, your mind will still be bewitched by the sword technique and fall into madness. Chu Yang said slowly, his eyes shining with a sharp light. When you break through to revered sword artist, we have other ways. The path of cultivation needs to be taken step by step. I believe you understand this principle. Gu Du Xing said shakily, Thank you. Thank you. He would never have thought that when he was at the end of his rope, such a big gift would fall from the sky. For the current Gu Du Xing, Chu Yang's existence was like a life-saving straw. It was his only hope to save Sister Xiao Miao. Gu Du Xing would rather die 10,000 times than give up this opportunity. Chu Yang smiled and finally relaxed. By doing this, he was of course keeping Gu Duxing alive at the root. But the biggest reason was the relationship between Gu Du Xing and Gu Miao Ling, because such a relationship touched the softest part of Chu Yang's heart. Mo Qing Wu. Such deep feelings, he could not let them down. And infatuated girls like Mo Qing Wu and Gu Miao Ling, he could not let them down. At this moment, someone outside the door asked, Excuse me, is there anyone inside? The two of them looked at each other. Then they suddenly screamed and jumped up. These two guys, from morning till now, only cared about themselves drinking and chatting. They did not have the awareness that businessmen should have. Heavenly Armament Pavilion was already late in the morning, but it was still not open for business. I'll open the door, you tidy up. Chu Yang was about to leave, but before he could finish his sentence, Gu Duxing had already jumped up, holding the revered berserker sword technique that he treasured like a treasure, and ran into his own room. Chu Yang was stunned. With a schwa sound, he hurriedly put away the dripping wine on the table. With a blah sound, he picked up the table and threw it behind him. Then he clapped his hands and walked over to open the door. The smell of alcohol rushed out as he opened the door. Ugh, cough, cough. There was a burst of coughing in front of the Heavenly Armament Pavilion. There was a young girl patiently waiting. But she couldn't help but frown when she felt this aura. Are you here to buy a sword? Chu Yang raised his eyebrows slightly. Even with Chu Yang's experience, he didn't know how to describe this girl in front of him. She was definitely not the kind of peerless beauty that would shock people at first sight. Whether it was her nose, mouth, or eyes, they were all very ordinary. But beyond the extreme ordinariness, there was a strange charm. If you only look at her once and then brush past her, I'm afraid she won't leave any impression in your heart. However, if you looked at her a few more times, you would immediately discover that this young girl was filled with too many differences. The facial features on his face seemed to be clear at a glance, but after looking at it for a long time, there was a feeling that it was becoming more and more misty. Her eyes were misty and dreamy. Her expression was indifferent and calm. She was clearly a woman, but she seemed to have the demeanor of an insufferably arrogant general. Standing in front of the door, although she looked delicate and weak, she gave people the feeling that she was as tall as a mountain. Yuan? Towering mountain, unshakable. She stood alone in front of the door of Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It seemed that she had been here for a while. Chu Yang hadn't opened the door for a long time, but she wasn't anxious or impatient. Her expression was tranquil and calm. She was clearly only a 17 or 18-year-old girl, but she gave people the feeling that she was extremely experienced. Almost at the first sight of her, Chu Yang's heart suddenly felt a sense of familiarity. It was as if he had seen her before. May I ask, are you the shopkeeper of Heavenly Armament Pavilion? The young girl's clear eyes looked at Chu Yang's face. Yes, may I know why you are here? Well, I'm here to see if your so-called Heavenly Armament Pavilion is worthy of its name. The young girl said indifferently, a customer is here, why don't you invite me in? If you want to come in, have you seen the notice at the door? Don't worry, gold and silver are not a problem. It's not like we don't have any treasures. Haha, but when you open the door to do business, I have to see your goods. I want to see if they are as magical as you boast. If they aren't worth it, I naturally won't spend money. The young girl put her hands behind her back and walked into Heavenly Armament Pavilion. That kind of natural and relaxed manner was as if she was walking into her own backyard with her hands behind her back. Chu Yang frowned. This young girl had an indescribable aura. Of all the women he had seen in his previous life and this life, none of them had this kind of special quality. She was really an anomaly. This is the Heavenly Armament Pavilion you were talking about? The young girl stood in front of the 4 weapons hanging on the wall with her hands behind her back and looked up slightly. She just looked at them with her hands behind her back and didn't do anything else. She just lifted her chin slightly, but for some reason, Chu Yang suddenly had a feeling that she was giving directions. It was like a king inspecting his territory and his people. Chu Yang was even more confused. She was obviously a girl. Why did he have this kind of feeling? Yes. A voice came out, but it wasn't Chu Yang's. Gu Duxing quietly appeared in the corner, looking at the young girl with cold eyes. His face had changed slightly, but his face was like an ice sculpture. It was still the same zombie-like face. He didn't have the slightest pretense because the other party was a girl. Can I take a look? The young girl didn't seem surprised that another person appeared out of nowhere. He just asked indifferently. To buy a sword from here, it doesn't look at your status or your wealth, but it depends on you. Gu Duxing said coldly, you don't deserve the swords here. If you don't, then even if you have enough wealth, you won't be able to take it away. The sword is looking for a master? I see. The young girl said softly and said slowly, but you want to choose a person, but I want to choose a sword. If the sword is not good, even if you kneel down and beg me, I won't take it. This sentence was tit for tat with Gu Duxing's words. Then, the young girl stretched out her hand and took the long sword from the wall. Holding it in her hand, she obviously didn't expect the sword to be so heavy. It was almost 3 times heavier than a normal long sword. Her arms sank slightly before she could hold it firmly. Her face showed a trace of surprise. Long sword? Chu Yang and Gu Duxing looked at each other and felt surprised. Normally, if a girl chose a sword, she would choose a light and nimble sword. That short sword was obviously more beautiful and elegant than this long sword. It was suitable for a girl to wear. But this long sword was rough and unruly, full of a man's masculinity. The two didn't expect that the first thing this girl looked at was this long sword. Then, with a clang, the long sword was unsheathed. A ray of light shot out. The girl squinted her eyes and praised, "Good sword." Then she slowly pulled the whole sword out of the scabbard. Her arms stretched forward, and the sword was slightly tilted in front of her eyes, looking at it at eye level. Just by looking at this tilted angle, Chu Yang and Gu Duxing realized at the same time that this girl must be an expert. Although she wasn't necessarily an expert in swordsmanship, but in terms of appreciation, she might not be inferior to the two of them. Chu Yang racked his brains, thinking of all the girls he met in his previous life and this life, but there was no one who fit the unique requirements of the girl in front of him. Although Gu Duxing's expression didn't change, he also thought of the girls from the big clans in the past 3 days. He found that even those girls might not be as graceful as the girl in front of him. Chapter 73. The body of the sword flashed with a soft light. It was as if the surface of the sword was rippling back and forth. The young girl held the sword in one hand and flicked her finger with the other. A wisp of wind from her finger silently hit the body of the sword. The long sword trembled and suddenly let out a sound like a dragon's cry. It resonated loudly and endlessly. It really is a divine weapon. The young girl praised. She then put the long sword back into the scabbard and picked up the saber. After looking at all 4 weapons, she raised her head and looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang looked on coldly. This young girl's expression from beginning to end was very calm. Even when she saw the rare treasured sword, her eyes did not change in the slightest. The expected shock, surprise, greed, reluctance, and other emotions were not in this young girl's eyes at all. It was as if she had just looked at it and that was it. Everything was so normal. Chu Yang could not help but be a little shocked. This kind of state of mind, this kind of cultivation, is this still a young girl? What price? The young girl seemed to be thinking about something. When she asked this question, she was a little absent-minded. Chu Yang was thinking about the identity of this young girl. Looking at her, her every movement had an air of arrogance. It was as if ordering people around was a habit of hers. Her whole body also had an indescribable air of nobility. He thought to himself, looks like she is definitely a noble. Even if she is not a direct subordinate of the royal family, she must be a princess of a royal family. But the strange thing is, why does such a person come out without any guards? This is really strange. Could it be that the security of Ironcloud Citadel is this good? Gu Duxing came and was like this, and now a young girl came. It was actually like this again. Also, since Chu Yang put up the sign of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, he was prepared for people to come and cause trouble. He wanted to take advantage of the situation to make a big fuss and then use the limelight to make a name for himself. He wanted to use his divine sword to create the biggest wave of public opinion in Ironcloud Citadel and stand at the heart of the storm. Who would have thought that besides a little hoodlum who came to cause trouble on the opening day, no one else came to visit? Those hedonistic young masters, unruly young girls, aristocrats who used their power to bully others, and relatives of the royal family who used their connections to intimidate others didn't appear. In the capital of Ironcloud Nation, which could easily kick out 3 people like that, it was as if they had disappeared without a trace. This was too strange. 100,000 taels of gold for each. Or, take out some precious treasures that can be exchanged, like 7-star white magnolia, spirit ginseng, empty spirit purple zoysia, 10,000 years yellow essence, and so on. If you really can't do it, then purple crystal jade, mysterious gold iron, star steel, nightmare silver, and diamond sand are also fine. If I approve of them, you can take them away. Chu Yang looked at this girl with an amused expression. She clearly didn't have any gold or silver with her, and she reported an astronomical figure. Even for a single country, this number was still enormous. These conditions were exactly what the sword spirit had told him about. Website www. Sim. Now that he said it word for word, this girl was really shocked. Even though her mental strength was outstanding, far surpassing that of ordinary people, but the other party's exorbitant demands still made her a little angry. Even the zombie-faced Gu Duxing, who had been clamoring that these 4 swords couldn't be sold, suddenly opened his mouth wide. This kind of price, robbery was no longer enough to describe it. You should just go and rob the national treasury. You just don't want to sell, right? The girl's eyes were cold as she looked at Chu Yang. She said what was in Gu Duxing's heart. Chu Yang smiled and took out an ingot of glistening gold. The next moment, the sword was in his hand. With a bang, the ingot was thrown on the table, and the long sword chopped down like a knife. With a few slashing sounds, it was like a knife cutting through tofu. Under the girl's incredulous gaze, the ingot of gold turned into pieces of gold in the blink of an eye. It scattered on the table, shining with a golden light. Then, Chu Yang's right hand grabbed the several 100-pound iron block that was leaning against the door. The long sword was suspended above the iron block, and his hand loosened. The sword tip was pointed down, and it calmly fell. With a slashing sound, the long sword silently stabbed into the iron block, and half of the sword's body was inserted. Only a foot-long sword blade was left, swaying slightly and emitting a soft light. The girl's eyes revealed a look of shock. Is it worth it? Chu Yang crossed his arms and asked with a smile. The girl looked straight at the sword, and her eyes shone with a fervent light. It was true that Iron Cloud lacked divine weapons, but she would never have thought that the weapon in front of her would be a weapon that only existed in legends. Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It was indeed worthy of its name, and fully deserved. Worth it. This kind of divine sword is simply a priceless treasure. No matter how much it costs, it is worth it. A voice suddenly boomed. Following this voice, a burly figure appeared behind the girl. The moment this voice sounded, Chu Yang and Gu Duxing looked at each other in shock. Because, even with their spiritual senses, they didn't notice when this person came. Didn't this mean that this person's cultivation level was at least beyond martial great master? The person who came was tall and sturdy, with a square face. His eyes were gentle but sharp, thick eyebrows, a straight nose, and 3 strands of black beard fluttering in the wind. He just stood there, but his broad shoulders gave people the feeling that he was holding up the entire world. From his body, there was a kind of aura that could repel 1,000 soldiers. There was no need for any self-introduction. Chu Yang and Gu Duxing recognized this person. In this world, besides the number 1 general, Tai Longcheng, there was no one else who could have this kind of spirit. Only Tai Longcheng was able to stand with his back straight and give off the feeling of an impenetrable defense against 10,000 soldiers. The number 1 general of Iron Cloud's military. One of the 2 pillars of Iron Cloud Nation, the god of war of the Chongtian continent, Tai Longcheng. At the same time, Chu Yang realized that the entire street had suddenly quieted down. It was so quiet that it was abnormal and strange. He didn't know when, but a group of elite soldiers had already sealed off the entire street. The originally bustling street was now so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. At the entrance of Heavenly Armament Pavilion, there were 4 people standing on each side. Their eyes were emotionless as they looked inside the shop. Although he didn't see anything, Chu Yang knew that the back window and the roof were already filled with people. And they were all experts. It really is a good sword. Tai Longcheng's cold eyes glanced at the swaying sword. He immediately turned his head and looked at the girl. His expression softened. "Why are you here?" Then he asked, "Why are you here alone?" "I came to take a look." The girl smiled calmly. "I am very curious about this heavenly armament pavilion. Where are your guards?" Tai Long Cheng's thick eyebrows furrowed. His eyes were cold. "Those guys, what are they doing? They are absolute bastards. They actually let you come out alone? When I get back, I will capture them all and feed them to the dogs. I sneaked out by myself. It has nothing to do with them." The girl grabbed Tai Long Cheng's shoulder and shook it. She begged, "Second uncle, I only have this little secret. I only have this little way to relax." Tai Long Cheng let out a long sigh. He looked at the girl with eyes full of love and regret. It seemed that he no longer wanted to pursue this matter. He turned his head and asked Chu Yang, "Little guy, these 2 swords and sabers, I will buy them." Chu Yang was startled. He squinted his eyes and asked, "What will you use to buy them?" Chapter 74. Hearing these words, the black-clothed men at the door immediately turned around. Chu Yang could only feel waves of cold, murderous aura locking onto him. Tai Long Cheng's words were like a breakthrough, breaking through the dam of murderous aura. Beside Chu Yang, another wave of murderous aura erupted like a flash flood, sweeping across the area. This wave of murderous aura was even purer and sharper. Fighting 1 against 4, he was actually not at a disadvantage. It was Gu Duxing who was quietly standing beside Chu Yang. Gu Duxing's hand was already on the hilt of his sword. His eyes were already emitting a dazzling light that could only be emitted from his entire body. Intimidating, yet calm. Gu Duxing's murderous aura and the 4 men's murderous aura surged together. Suddenly, the entire shop felt as if it had fallen into an ice cave. The cold aura filled half the street. In Gu Duxing's eyes, no matter what these people in front of him were, no matter what power they had, the lower 3 heavens was still the lower 3 heavens. The lower 3 heavens could never be compared to the upper 3 heavens. Not to mention a general, even if it was an emperor. So what? Chu Yang was his biggest reliance to save Sister Xiao Miao, and also his only hope. If these people wanted to deal with Chu Yang, then they would have to step over his dead body. No matter what, as long as you dare to make a move, then I will dare to kill you. Tai Long Cheng looked at Gu Duxing in surprise. He waved his hand behind him, and the 4 men's murderous aura immediately disappeared without a trace. Gu Duxing snorted and withdrew his aura, returning to his cold zombie face. He stood behind Chu Yang, motionless. The 4 men opposite him also withdrew their murderous aura, each of them cautiously looking at Gu Duxing. This kind of murderous aura, and such a young man at that, gave the 4 men a huge impact. Not bad. Tai Long Cheng praised, but it was not clear whether he was praising Gu Duxing or the sword. He looked at Chu Yang and slowly said, "You have only opened for 3 days, and your shop has already faced the crisis of being closed dozens of times. You should know that if I did not give the order, your shop and even you would have already turned into ashes." But Chu Yang secretly gritted his teeth, thinking, "I was wondering why no one came to cause trouble. So it was you, old man, playing tricks in the dark. Old man, you ruined the young master's plan, and you still want to report? For the heavenly army." Tai Long Cheng suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Yang. "You can come up with such a name and openly erect such a signboard on Iron Cloud Nation's first street. This shows that you are very scheming. Moreover, you are very far-sighted. You have grasped the real weakness of Iron Cloud. This old man wanted to see just what kind of intentions you had. Otherwise, a small shop like yours, even if it is filled with divine weapons, is not worthy of this old man's condescension." "What intentions?" Hearing these words, the girl beside him couldn't help but raise her head and look at Chu Yang. "That's right, this person harbors ill intentions. However, if you only have ulterior motives, then you are not worthy of my visit." Tai Long Cheng clasped his hands behind his back. "I have my own reasons for coming here today." Furthermore, before that he had to stop anyone who was interested in the heavenly armament pavilion. No matter who it was, as long as people came, the shop owner could smoothly rely on these people to achieve his goal. Although this old man doesn't know what he's plotting, a direct blockade can indeed prevent any plot from having the time and space to display its power. This shop is not here to sell weapons. It is here to cause trouble. Tai Long Chung coldly hammered the final word. Chu Yang's true intentions were almost revealed. A direct blockade is the simplest and most effective method. If it was another time, I would have let him go for a while. However, Diwu Qingro has begun to deploy troops in the southwest. At this moment I cannot let him go. Chu Yang's heart trembled. On his back, he could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Who said that everyone in the world was stupid? This Tai Long Cheng was simply too terrifying. He did not know of Chu Yang's plan, but a simple blockade was enough to completely destroy Chu Yang's plan. There was no more follow-up. Diwu Qingrou's plan against Iron Cloud Nation began 10 years ago. 10 years ago, a large number of assassins suddenly infiltrated Iron Cloud. These people did not assassinate nobles, generals, but they killed all of Iron Cloud's famous blacksmiths one by one. 10 years ago, there was a storm of blood. Tai Long Cheng's eyes became as sharp as a needle. Until now, in the records of the government, it is still a mystery. All of the blacksmiths who were skilled in forging and could make high-quality weapons were all killed. Then, the blacksmiths in the army also mysteriously died one by one. From top to bottom, more than 30,000 blacksmiths died. Especially the blacksmiths who were at the great master level, none of them were spared. The entire Iron Cloud Nation had the richest mines in the entire continent, but it became a desert for blacksmiths. Such a hilarious thing actually happened just like that. Tai Long Cheng snorted and said, "The despicable Ministry of Justice only treated this as an ordinary case. They hastily dealt with it." In the end, 3 of Great Zhao's largest blacksmiths and 17 domestic and foreign weapons suppliers were uprooted. Only then did they realize that this matter had shaken the foundation of the nation. But at that time, it was too late to regret. The most tragic thing was that the blacksmiths were killed. Even the places where they lived were burned to the ground. Their life's work was all destroyed in one day. Those precious experiences that could be passed down could be counted on one's fingers. Chu Yang's mind was shaken as he listened. Iron Cloud Nation became a blacksmithing desert because of this matter. Diwu Qingrou's move to remove the firewood from under the cauldron was indeed extremely vicious. Moreover, only a few blacksmiths died. In the beginning, it was not enough to arouse the suspicions of the higher-ups of Iron Cloud. However, by the time they realized it, this massacre had already come to an end. Tens of thousands of lives were destroyed for the sake of Diwu Qingrou's ambition. However, there was no evidence. This kind of ruthless method was truly shocking. Moreover, after this massacre, even after Great Zhao unified Iron Cloud, there was no need to worry about any rebellions within Iron Cloud. How many blacksmiths could a country have? Because Iron Cloud was a mining hub, there were tens of thousands of skilled blacksmiths. However, after this massacre, how many would be left? Even the young and strong men who originally wanted to become blacksmiths would give up after this massacre. The key to mobilizing troops was the word mobilizing troops. The word troops did not only refer to soldiers, but also to weapons. Without weapons, what would they use to rebel? With 2 hands? Wasn't this a joke? This kind of thing made Chu Yang's hair stand on end. These were tens of thousands of lives, not tens of thousands of pieces of wood. Moreover, they were all commoners. This was a pure and inhumane massacre. How cruel, unscrupulous, and insane was the person who gave such an order. Moreover, not long after this incident, Great Zhao began to fight under the leadership of Diwu Qingrou. Great Zhao and Iron Cloud were at war frequently. Naturally, the soldiers' weapons could not meet the demand. However, at this time, Iron Cloud did not have blacksmiths who could create elite weapons. This incident seemed to be nothing more than an inhumane massacre. Who would have thought that it would affect the outcome of the war between 2 great countries? When the war started, there were frequent killings. Iron Cloud had the richest mines in the world. They had an inexhaustible supply of iron, But they could not create top-notch weapons. If the weapons of the generals were damaged, they would not be able to find a suitable weapon. They could only use the swords of ordinary soldiers. Ordinary soldiers were not in any danger because they used ordinary swords. However, who would have thought that the enemy's actions of massacring the lowest-level blacksmiths was to deal with the generals of Iron Cloud? Tai Longqing roared and shouted, "A person who could use 80 pounds of weapons was forced to use 7 or 8 pounds of swords. Moreover, when the swords collided with the enemy's weapons, they would break. How could their fighting strength only drop by 1 level? This is one of the major reasons why Iron Cloud could only protect itself for so many years. It could not eradicate external threats, let alone attack. On the battlefield, the soldiers used inferior swords and rode their horses to fight the enemy. After one collision, their swords and spears broke. How comical was this? How many heroes have died so tragically at the hands of opponents who were inferior to them? Thus, the entire Iron Cloud nation was forced to retreat. The soldiers wanted to kill the enemy, but they were powerless to reverse the situation. They could only watch as the surrounding 7 states and 48 counties fell into Great Zhao's territory. This also gave rise to Wuxia's unparalleled reputation. In these 8 years, Iron Cloud Nation relaxed all the requirements for blacksmiths, but it still could not make up for the losses of these 8 years. Moreover, the brothers who died in battle will never come back. The quality of weapons is Iron Cloud Nation's biggest weakness. Now, you actually opened Heavenly Armament Pavilion in the most prosperous street of Iron Cloud Citadel. Chapter 75. Hearing Tai Longqing's words, the girl's eyes suddenly became as sharp as swords as she stared at Chu Yang. Tai Longqing took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "When I heard the words Heavenly Armament Pavilion, the first thing that came to my mind was my comrades who died in battle, my brothers who died without even their bones remaining. Do you know how many people died in front of me with a look of helplessness, and disbelief? They were the heroes of my Iron Cloud." Chu Yang finally understood why this #1 general personally came to Iron Cloud City and why he gave the order to seal off Heavenly Armament Pavilion. It turned out that his actions had touched the deepest wound in his heart. Even though Tai Longqing spoke calmly, Chu Yang could still see and feel that this legendary general's heart was filled with grief and indignation. Chu Yang always knew that Iron Cloud Nation was a barren land for blacksmiths. High-quality weapons were basically bought from Limitless Nation at a high price. But he really did not know that there was such an inhumane thing going on here. General Tai's eyes are really sharp. Chu Yang smiled calmly. "So, you admit that you are a spy sent by Wuxia? Admit?" Chu Yang smiled. "If I was really a subordinate of Wuxia, how could I use such a blatant method to be a spy?" Tai Longqing stared at him for a while, then suddenly said coldly, "But there is always a reason for everything. I don't like the look of Wuxia. Is this reason enough?" Chu Yang smiled. Suddenly, his body flashed, and he was at the door. He punched one of the 4 guards. This attack came without any warning. It was a clean hit. One moment he was smiling at Tai Longqing, and the next moment his fist was at the guard's throat. That person was shocked. He quickly turned around and 3 swords came out of their scabbards at the same time. They were like poisonous snakes stabbing at Chu Yang. The 4 of them were experts themselves, and the tacit understanding between them was even more natural. When one person was attacked, the other 3 attacked at the same time. Chu Yang let out a long laugh. His fingers suddenly moved, and a pair of fleshy palms went up to meet the sword and saber that were glittering with cold light. With 3 soft sounds, the most unbelievable thing happened. One of Chu Yang's fingers met with the 3 swords, and a section of the sword that had killed countless enemies was silently broken. When the 2 guards saw that Chu Yang had caught the sword with his bare hands, a trace of cruelty appeared in their eyes. It was as if he had already seen the tragic scene of his finger being separated from his palm, and his flesh and blood flying everywhere. However, he did not expect that when his finger touched the sword, it would be the sword that broke. No one had thought that something like this would happen. They couldn't help but be stunned. Chu Yang's finger had already stopped at the throat of the previous person. She pinched his protruding Adam's apple softly, or even very gently. Then, his figure flashed and reappeared in front of Tai Longcheng. The four revered martial artists looked at Chu Yang with shock in their eyes. When a person's hand collided with a sharp sword, the sword was actually cut in half. Was this still a body of flesh and blood? Especially the guard whose Adam's apple was pinched by Chu Yang, he felt a chill all over his body. If Chu Yang had used a little bit of strength, his Adam's apple would have been broken. Tai Longcheng said that Chu Yang was a spy, and Chu Yang could not prove that he was not. Therefore, when encountering such an inexplicable situation, the only way to explain it, the best way to explain it, and also the most effective way to explain it, was strength. There is another reason, and that is that I can easily assassinate you. Is this reason enough? Also, Chu Yang smiled and picked up the broken sword from the ground. Then, he used his own sword to cut the sword into pieces as if he was cutting a carrot. This is the value of a heavenly weapon. Is this value enough? In a split second, everyone looked at Chu Yang with shock in their eyes. Assassinate me, not necessarily. Easily assassinate me is not something you can do. Although you are confident, there are some things in the world that cannot be done with confidence alone. However, the fact that you don't like Diwu Qingro is enough. Tai Longcheng's hawk-like eyes looked at Chu Yang. After a while, he suddenly laughed. The other two reasons are not important. After a pause, he said again, so small. Although he was surprised by Chu Yang's strange yet powerful strength, he did not lose his composure. Tai Longcheng was even more confident that if Chu Yang attacked him, it would not be so easy. Chu Yang's action this time was due to the power of Calamity Sword. When the sword tip of Calamity Sword was in his hand, it was naturally invincible. Moreover, the moment his finger touched the sword's iron essence was absorbed by Calamity Sword. Chu Yang's finger was like touching a piece of wood, and it was rotten wood. Otherwise, even if Chu Yang's sword was made of iron essence, it would not have been able to cut through iron as if it was mud. After all, the swords of the four bodyguards were not ordinary. Although they were not at the level of heavenly weapons, their degree of toughness was far beyond that of ordinary swords. However, this gave Tai Longcheng and the others an extraordinary shock. Then, I want to know your true purpose. Tai Longcheng laughed for a while and said in a deep voice, true purpose. Chu Yang pondered for a while and said, I have no enmity with Diwu Qingro, but I do not want him to win. I do not want him to unify the world. Because of Tai Longcheng's blockade, Chu Yang did not have the opportunity to directly contact Tai Butian. However, Tai Longcheng personally came here. Although he personally sealed Chu Yang's shop, he also gave Chu Yang an opportunity. Because he personally came, Chu Yang had already shown his strength and capital. The next moment he showed his wisdom. Even if he directly met Tai Butian, Tai Longcheng's attitude was crucial. I believe that no one here is willing to let that schemer Diwu Qingro succeed. Tai Longcheng smiled gently. Chu Yang's display of strength this time, at least on the surface, seemed to have made Tai Longcheng somewhat relieved. Chu Yang smiled and said, but now, if Iron Cloud wants to defeat Diwu Qingro, it is basically a delusion. It is absolutely impossible to succeed. Why do you say that? This time, the girl pondered and asked. Tai Longcheng smiled indifferently and did not speak. He only listened quietly. His fierce aura from a moment ago had been completely restrained. First, Diwu Qingro's army is powerful. Great Zhao's armored soldiers are close to 1 million. The continent's top 10 generals, from 2nd to 7th, are all in Great Zhao. Each one of them is a hero of the world. Ironcloud only has 2, 1st and 10th. We should all know that this kind of ranking of generals is not something to be said casually. It is something that is achieved through countless battles of life and death. Everyone's path to becoming a famous general involves hundreds of thousands of lives. Chu Yang quickly recalled the information from his previous life. Second, although Great Zhao is nominally ruled by a monarch, The actual power is in the hands of Diwu Qingro alone. Moreover, Diwu Qingrou's intelligence network far surpasses that of Iron Cloud and Wuji combined. Diwu Qingrou's Golden Horse Riders Department has never appeared in front of people, but Golden Horse Riders Department is full of talented people. Moreover, their fighting strength has reached an unimaginable level. There are more than 8,000 elite soldiers in there. This news was like a sudden clap of thunder that exploded in the hearts of Tai Longcheng and the girl. Golden Horse Riders Department? You also know about Golden Horse Riders Department? Tai Longcheng frowned and waved his hand. His expression became serious for the first time. Immediately, the soldiers outside retreated a few dozen feet. The entire street was silent. Except for a few personal bodyguards, there was not a single person within a few dozen feet of the area. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Countless experts rushed up and sealed off the entire roof. Heavenly Armament Pavilion's shop immediately became the heart of the entire city. Even birds would not be able to enter. It was clear that Tai Longcheng attached great importance to this news. However, the strange thing was that the girl, who obviously had nothing to do with these national affairs, was not driven out by Tai Longcheng. Instead, he acquiesced to her existence. Chapter 76. The young girl suddenly turned her head and looked at Tai Longcheng. Her eyes were as sharp as a sword and as cold as ice. However, as he pondered, the sharpness in his eyes gradually disappeared. 8 years ago, His Majesty was hit by a poison arrow and his life was at stake. He was too young. He was only 10 years old at that time. Although he was intelligent, he could not convince the public. The entire Iron Cloud nation was on the verge of collapse. All the ministers had their own thoughts. The situation was very dangerous. Tai Longcheng slowly said. Moreover, Chu Yang had a feeling that he seemed to be explaining. Chu Yang thought that since it was the first time they met, he did not have the qualifications to explain. Even if he did, there was no need for him to explain. He could not help but feel suspicious. Tai Longcheng continued. Then, on the battlefield, Diwu Qingro suddenly made a few unnecessary and incomprehensible mistakes. He buried a few experienced generals of Great Zhao on the battlefield. Those few battles were unnecessary losses for the Great Zhao Empire, and they were also losses that were impossible to occur. Because at that time, as long as they attacked with all their forces, Iron Cloud would have been destroyed within half a year. Iron Cloud would have been powerless to reverse the situation. But at that critical moment, a few generals suddenly rushed into a death trap because of the wrong information, allowing us to easily destroy them. Those 3 decisive battles gave Iron Cloud a chance to take a breather. After that, when we gathered together and looked back at those 3 battles, we found that we did not make any effort to make them fall into a trap. In other words, they were seeking their own deaths. Such a fact has left us inexplicably astonished. After that, Great Zhao reorganized their army for a month. And during that 1 month, there was no need to rest and reorganize. It was as if they were intentionally giving us time to breathe and think. Tai Longcheng took a deep breath and said, until we analyzed the intelligence of Great Zhao several times, we discovered that this was Diwu Qingrou's plot. But this scheme forced us to cooperate. We could not help but be led by the nose. Diwu Qingrou needs a long and drawn-out war. He needs to continuously accumulate military exploits, eliminate dissidents, promote his confidence, and control the entire military and government in his own hands. At that time, our Iron Cloud needed more time than Diwu Qingrou. We needed more time to consolidate our domestic military and government into a fist. Because at that time, it was already a crisis, and life and death were on the line. If we do not cooperate, Iron Cloud Nation will be destroyed within a few months. But even if we do not cooperate, Diwu Qingrou's still has other opportunities. For example, the Limitless Nation. Therefore, we have no choice. Even if this is a disgrace, I can only pinch my nose and swallow it. Tai Longcheng let out a long sigh. Although he didn't continue to speak, Chu Yang and the others already understood. At that time, the commanders of the two countries, under this tacit understanding, jointly carried out their own methods of eliminating dissidents and unifying the country. You fight for your military exploits, I fight for my territory, you eliminate your dissidents, I kill my enemies. In short, the goal of the two was the same: to consolidate the power of the entire country into a fist that they could use all of their strength. If Wuxia fought a decisive battle at that time, he would naturally win. This was a matter of certainty. But after the victory, he would have to face the fear of the emperor and the suspicion of the ministers. At that time, his foundation was not stable. The worst result would be dying without a burial place. Even if he could save his life and maintain a certain status, he would forever lose the opportunity to reach the peak of power. With Wuxia's wild ambition, how could he give up under such a favorable situation? Therefore he could not. At that time, the entire Iron Cloud nation was in the hands of Tai Longcheng. In a precarious situation, he did not even need the enemy to attack him to collapse. Tai Longcheng naturally did not want to fight a decisive battle. The commanders of the two countries did not even meet each other. But from thousands of miles away, they carried out a cooperation that reached a terrifying level of tacit understanding. The two restricted each other and weighed each other. Today, you win one battle and kill my enemy. Tomorrow, I win one battle and remove your obstacles. During that time, the millions of soldiers fighting between the two countries became a game controlled by two people behind the scenes. On one side, millions of dead souls created Wuxia's unparalleled reputation. On the other side, millions of dead souls condensed into Iron Cloud. However, this game was to buy time and fight for qualifications. But for the two sides, the starting point was completely different. Wuxia was doing this for Great Zhao and for himself. However, Tai Longcheng had managed to break Iron Cloud apart in this humiliating and continuous campaign. Then he had reformed Iron Cloud from a pile of loose sand. Now, he had become a mighty city that had the strength to fight a war. If it were not for Tai Longcheng and Wuxia's precise cooperation, Iron Cloud Nation would not have lasted until now. Not to mention waiting for Bu Tiantai to regain power and compete with Wuxia. All these changes were really unimaginable. Moreover, at every step, the commanders of the two sides must give each other a hint that only the other side could understand. Then, each side could take what they wanted. But such hints could not be seen by others. In this situation, the amount of brain power needed was simply unimaginable. Chu Yang could not figure out how Tai Longcheng was able to do this. Under Wuxia's leadership, he cooperated but did not allow the other side to achieve their goal. Moreover, under the other side's inescapable net, he gradually built up Iron Cloud's resistance. Until now, the border had become an impenetrable wall. This person's calculation ability, leadership ability, control ability, military ability, and even political ability were not as good as Wuxia's. But the difference was very small. The two were mortal enemies, but in the midst of fighting each other, each managed their own rear, and it was flawless. These two people were really terrifying. However, there was one thing that made Chu Yang's heart turn cold. Tai Longcheng and Wuxia's military expedition is tantamount to throwing away millions of soldiers on both sides as if they are lifeless chess pieces. However, those are millions of lives. There was never a moment like this where Chu Yang understood the meaning of the phrase, "A general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. Do you regret it? The one who said this was Gu Duxing. His two cold eyes looked at Tai Longcheng. Millions of soldiers were buried on the battlefield under the cooperation of the two commanders. Not even their bones were left. Chapter 77. Regret? I, Tai Longcheng, do not regret it. Dying on the battlefield is the fate of a soldier. Tai Longcheng's eyes were steady as if he was looking into nothingness. Even though this old man is grieving, I will not regret it. Grieving? Gu Duxing sneered. Did you feel any sorrow or regret when you personally sent these good men to their deaths, one by one, to be slaughtered by the enemy? You should know that the generals were at fault and were not of the same mind as you, but the soldiers were innocent. You could have used another method to save the soldiers. Gu Duxing really could not imagine that in this world, there was such a thing. The more good men, the more iron-blooded they were, the more they were sacrificed and the more they were abandoned. What kind of bullshit theory was this? And the people who did such a ridiculous thing were the top officials of two great nations. Two people who were supposed to benefit the people had become two cruel executioners who had personally sent millions of good men in their own countries to their deaths. If I did not do this, how could I gain Diwu Qingrou's trust? Even though this old man is grieving for these dead soldiers, I have no regrets. Tai Longcheng said coldly, their deaths saved millions of people of Iron Cloud. If they did not die, Iron Cloud would have become Great Zhao's territory 8 years ago. All of Iron Cloud's men and women would have become slaves. They would have been humiliated and bullied by others. I, Tai Longcheng, did such a thing that angered the heavens, but I do not regret it. In the history books of the future, when the truth of these 8 years is revealed, I, Tai Longcheng, will be a sinner. But I have no regrets. If I could do it all over again, I would still make the same choice. If I, Tai Longcheng, had surrendered and allowed Great Zhao to invade, I would have suffered some losses, but it would not have been too big. In Iron Cloud, I was a prince, a marshal. In Great Zhao, even if I was not a prince, I would still be a duke. Even if I was not a marshal, I would not be under one person, but I would not fall to the point where I would be humiliated. Even Diwu Qingrou would not dare. And now, this old man has to bear this eternal infamy, but what about it? Tai Longcheng smiled, someone has to bear this infamy. As long as Iron Cloud is safe, this old man is the best person to bear this infamy. But this infamy is not easy to bear. Chu Yang snorted and said, since the two of you are cooperating so closely, then let's take advantage of each other in this kind of cooperation. Tai Longcheng's body stiffened. His eyes suddenly emitted a sharp light. He looked at Chu Yang, but didn't say anything. 8 whole years. After 8 years of fighting, both sides suffered heavy casualties. Naturally, they needed more fresh blood. And these people would definitely use their victories to climb to a high position. But this was also the best time to arrange for a condom. I don't believe that you, Marshal Tai, didn't do that. Tai Longcheng's face was cold, he did not speak or move. I also believe that Diwu Qingrou has already arranged his men in Iron Cloud and Sich. Moreover, even though you have a scheming mind, understand tactics, and can see through the battle situation to fight for the greatest benefits for your side, you also have a view of the overall situation. But you are not like Diwu Qingrou, who is a successful schemer and politician. Therefore I believe that. Chu Yang smiled, but the words he said made Tai Longcheng's whole body turn cold. If you were in Great Zhao, there would definitely be more than 100 spies. A difference of 10 times. He paused and said, I am talking about the military, the general who leads the troops. Tai Longcheng sighed softly. Therefore, on the surface, Iron Cloud is already invulnerable, like an iron bastion. But, if Diwu Qingrou really opens the curtain to the final battle, Iron Cloud will still be the same as 8 years ago, unable to withstand a single blow. Chu Yang said sharply, do you really think that Diwu Qingrou will let you build Iron Cloud into a monolithic block? If you really think this way, then you are not worthy of the position of the #1 general. Tai Longcheng laughed strangely and unexpectedly praised from the bottom of his heart, not bad. You said it very well. He suddenly pondered and asked, what you said, is it because you have a secret intelligence network, or is it because you saw it? Is it your personal opinion? As soon as Tai Longcheng's words left his mouth, the eyes of the girl who had been standing silently on the side suddenly lit up. She looked at Chu Yang. Deep in her eyes, a trace of urgency emerged. Tai Longcheng asked this question with a very cautious tone. This was because the implications of this question were too great. If Chu Yang had such an intelligence network, he would be able to detect information that his own side could not. Then it would be a great help. With this powerful intelligence network, Chu Yang would have the qualifications to work with Iron Cloud. Work together, not subordinate. But if Chu Yang did not have such an intelligence network and only speculated based on a few clues, then it would be even more frightening. It was enough to prove that this young man in front of them was not inferior to Diwu Qingro in terms of intelligence. In fact, he was even more intelligent. This was a heaven-shaking talent. One person could make a country prosper. One person could establish a country. This was the kind of person that people were talking about. Chu Yang was silent for a moment and finally said, "I do not have such a powerful intelligence network." Tai Long Cheng and the girls' faces changed color at the same time. Their expressions were always calm. Even when they heard about Diwu Qingrou's conspiracy and his unexpected strength, their eyes only slightly moved. But when they heard Chu Yang's words, even their faces changed. All of this was because of the intelligence of this young man in front of them? I didn't speculate about this either. Chu Yang added. He knew the meaning of Tai Longcheng's question. He also knew that if he let Tai Longcheng misunderstand, it would be very beneficial for him. But Chu Yang still gave up on this opportunity. Because if he really gave the other side such a hint, then in the future, there would be many things that they would ask for his opinion on. Even though he would be able to obtain power far beyond his expectations, but at that time, if he made a mistake, then he would directly lose millions of soldiers. It would directly affect the outcome of the war between the two countries. Once he made a mistake, even he would not have the opportunity to turn the situation around. Everything would still proceed according to the trajectory of his previous life, and it would be unstoppable. If Chu Yang really had this kind of ability, then of course he would not pass on this responsibility. But he was only relying on the memories of his previous life. He did not really have such keen observation skills. He was well aware of this point. So he gave up on this opportunity. However, his vague words also gave Tai Longcheng a vague hint. This person is definitely a world-shaking talent. Tai Longcheng raised his head and pondered for a while. Seeing that Chu Yang did not have any intention to continue, he knew that this matter was most likely a secret. Right now, the two sides had not really started to cooperate, so the other side naturally could not completely reveal everything. Now was the time to talk about conditions. But Tai Longcheng did not want to talk about it, because he had other plans. He turned his head and looked at Chu Yang. "You said so much, what do you want?" "What you said is a secret that Diwu Qingro would never reveal. No matter what, you know a lot. Just this point alone is already very valuable. You don't like Diwu Qingro, I already believe that. But what do you want to do in Iron Cloud?" "What I want to do is actually very clear." Chu Yang smiled and said, "Can't you see it?" Tai Longcheng smiled and said, "Yes, but no matter what you do, it has nothing to do with me. The person you should be looking for the most is Bu Tiantai, not me." When he said the words, Bu Tiantai, he did not look sideways, he only looked at Chu Yang. But his voice was a little strange. "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.